Korean revisionism, it says. From the Espresso Stalinist. Where do we begin? Where do we begin with this? Bill Bland? Let's start with Bill Bland. See what the fuck Bill Bland's got to say about this. Bill Bland, the Workers' Party of Korea, and revisionism. Written by Bill Bland for the Communist League. Oh, and they're coming at a comrade of ours, Dermot Hudson, here as well. In his paper entitled The WPK's Struggle Against Revisionism, Comrade Dermot Hudson expresses agreement with reported statement by Nina Andreev. Quote, as the Russian communist leader, Dr. Nina Andreev remarked at the Copenhagen seminar on the Juche idea in 1995. The statement concern was to the effect that the critique of modern revisionism made by the Workers' Party of Korea was, quote, more thoroughgoing and mature, Nina said, than that made by the Albanian Party of Labor. You see what this is happening here already, right? So already within the first little bit, we've got the problem that they're having is that Dermot Hudson and Nina Andreeva said that
Julian, caboose me. I love you guys.
Yo, third person commentary. Oh my god. Thank you for the gift sub. Okay, well that's a hype train too that's happening, so you actually get a little bit of a break. You get a little bit of a reprieve before this gets real. You get to hear the theme song. Thanks to you comrades hitting that hype train. A little reprieve before it gets fucking bad.
Lil Pump, Juju Gang. Oh, self-reliance. DPRK. Juju Gang, Juju Gang,
It's
Juju Gang,
raining.
Juju Gang,
You don't
Juju
even
Gang,
want
Juju
out
Gang,
there.
Juju Gang. Sprint 3 Rex on some new grain. Macron, you love doing Juche. I fucking fears I forgot a name, yeah. I won't vibe in no bushy thing. Radical express on coming man.
Juju gang, Juju gang, Juju gang.
Juju Gang, Juju Gang, Juju Gang, Juju Gang, Juju Gang, Juju Gang, Juju Gang. Sprint 3 Rex on some new grain. Macron, you love doing Juche. I fucking fears
Tank 2 does not have an anthem yet.
Radical express on coming man, yeah. Juju Gang, Juju Gang, Juju Gang.
If there's any musically inclined comrades, though, feel free to contribute one.
Still slinging Juju in the jets. Korea and Cuba making better meds. None of these camps be new to me, huh? See kids there call it tutory. Got some red suits for free.
Fuck your army, fuck your bourgeoisie.
Bitch, your press expresses sadness. America's the Morty's found to madness. Kim Jong-un show no tenderness. America's strategies crying about the status. Everybody screaming fuck the US. Lil Kim be laughing about the progress. North Korea controlling the ICBM tech. If America gonna attack, we're wrecking right back. Juju Gang, Juju Gang, Juju Gang, Juju Gang, Juju Gang, Juju Gang, Juju Gang.
I've got some literature in my car that will change your whole way of thinking.
I love doing Juche. I fucking pierce, I forgot it.
Yo!
I can't buy in no bushy
Our toothbrush, thank you so much for this subby. Appreciate your support, toothbrush.
Sprint 3 Rex also new grain. My carny love doing Juche. I fucking pierce, I forgot the name, yeah. I can't buy in no bushy thing. Ready go spread some coming meme, yeah. Juju Gang, Juju Gang, Juju Gang.
Oh yes, and by the way,
Yeah.
my conversation from the other day, from Friday, if you missed it, my conversation with JFK Rotting is now live
Larry, if we
on the
could
internet,
Big nerds together. So
where you can see my content. So, if you missed that, check that out. And thank you so much, comrades. I appreciate that. We still got 2 minutes on the hype train. Okay, well then. Wait, not playlists. know what it's gotta be. I feel like this will palate cleanse us right before we get into this terrible article. But I just want to point out that the first thing about that article is that they're mad that somebody said that DPRK had a more robust analysis of revisionism.
어머니 그 품처럼 따사로워라 아버지 그 품처럼 자유로워라 수라의 촌난 자식 한 품에 안고 총을 다해 보살피시네 노래하자 김종국 위대하신 용도자 사랑하자 김종국 친근한 호보이 한마음 믿고 따르네 친근한 호보이 배부신 근종은 바다 같아라 수시는 그 믿음은 하늘 같아라 언제나 우리 곁에 함께 계시며 모든 소원 꼽혀주시네 노래하자 김종국
Literature in my car that will change your whole way of thinking.
Yo,
사랑하자 김종국
Orly Astra, thank you so much for the Prime subby. Let's go. Appreciate that so much.
한마음 믿고 따르네 친근한 호보이
Hi, Miumis. Yes, you're back.
All for one motherfucker for all.
Yo, Rice Ball Basket, thank you so much for the gift sub.
김종국 친근한 우리 호보이 항상 우리 앞을 열어주시네 더 좋은 우리 행복 알아오시네 한없이 어려운 그 새끼들도 더 밝은 미래로 노래하자 김종국 위대하신 용도자 사랑하자 김종국 친근한 호보이 믿는 한마음 믿고 따르네 친근한 호보이 노래하자 김종국
I like that guy the best.
용도자
That's me. That's me at any occasion.
친근한 호보이 믿는 한마음 믿고 따르네 친근한 호보이 노래하자 김종국 위대하신 용도자 사랑하자 김종국 친근한 호보이 한마음 믿고 따르네
The Western mind cannot comprehend people liking their political parties and representatives. That's why for some people that will always be a terrifying sight right there. But not to me. It's beautiful. To me, it's beautiful. And not only that, I can illustrate my feeling of it completely. Exactly, Red Midwest. Exactly. I can illustrate it here for you. Here, allow me to illustrate my feelings on the matter. With something the kids these days call a meme. Okay? Here's a meme. This is called a meme. And this is to illustrate my point. Like this, go like that. There, look. How I was taught to view communists on the left, mean, evil, scary face, versus how I view them now on the right, Kim Jong-un getting tickled. Man is getting tickled here. Okay? It's funny, this was like originally a meme that had Barney here. And then it was like, why do I need Barney there when Kim Jong-un is being tickled by this gentleman. You know, like clearly that said that I think that is a better point. I like the how I was taught to view communists versus how I view them now. Look at this guy. You get it. You're starting to get it, aren't you? Yeah, imagine trying to tickle Donald Trump. Ugh. He gives people piggybacks and shit. I wonder if I have the picture of him giving the piggyback. Hold on. Let me see if I do. I might. I used to. Yeah, I do. Right here, look. There's also, how about this one? Kim Jong-un giving out piggyback rides. You're starting to get it, aren't you? You're starting to see why so many people love this guy, right? He like shows up. He shows up to like get a picture taken at some kind of like political event. Next thing you know, you're getting tickled. He's tickling you. You're tickling him. Piggyback rides. The hell's going on? Yeah, yeah. I don't want to think about it really too much, to be honest with you, Sam. Right. So anyway, back to the haters of DPRK here. This is what you call hoaxism hate. Hoaxism hate. Written by Bill Bland. So first of all, they're mad that they said that the WPK's analysis of revisionism is more thoroughgoing and mature. Says Nina and Dermot Hudson. And so they're mad because they said that it's more mature than that made by the Albanian Party of Labor. Impossible. Impossible. That can't possibly be the case. Is basically what we got here. Where is Albania today? No, you don't understand. That doesn't count. Voya, for some reason. For some reason or another, that just does not count actually at all, okay? Get the hell out of here. Two short quotations are enough to demonstrate. Two short quotations are enough to demonstrate this. The questionable accuracy of Andreev's assertion. In December 1960, the leader of the Party of Labor of Albania, Enver Hoxha, told the Central Committee of the PLA, quote, following his advent to power, Khrushchev and his revisionist group had worked out a complete plan. Marxism-Leninism would be negated, and all those trends and persons that had been unmasked, attacked, and defeated as anti-Marxists, who had been liquidated by the Marxism-Leninism in action, were to be rehabilitated. This meant that both Lenin and Stalin had to be attacked. Today, it has become even clearer that these intriguers, liars, opportunists, and revisionists are doing all these things openly. Our party is fully convinced that such monstrous accusations and slanders were brought against Stalin to discredit both him as a person and the work of this great Marxist-Leninist. Khrushchev and his group are on a revisionist course. Enver Hoxha. And I mean, that's great. Fantastic, right? And now this. And this is how you're going to see that. I mean, you'll see other artists articles that use this technique, but this is such a dishonest way. You'll see. Because look, now they go in contrast. Okay, so now contrast what you just read there with a Korean delegation in Moscow. Signed in 1961, July, a joint communique saying that the talks which had been held there had shown, quote, complete identity of views between the Soviet and North Korean leaders on the questions relating to international communist movement, Soviet-Korean joint communique. Ha! Got him! Right? Don't you see? See how Enver Hoxha in this speech, the leader of the Labor Party, don't you see how him giving this analysis against Khrushchev and against the traitors of Marxism? Don't you see how it's exactly identical to this joint Soviet communique? Okay, so I just want to I want to first start by explaining, of course, what's dishonest about this comparison, and I will actually dig into my archives here and find Kim Jong Il show you here. What's up, Jesus slut? What's this, coming in a little aggressive, calling me a slut right off the bat, don't you think? But welcome. Jesus Christ. So anyway, like I was saying, first of all, you're talking about a joint communique, which essentially, like, these two parties were talking to each other. They sent a communication back and forth. And it's basically like saying complete identity of views between Soviet and North Korean leaders on questions relating to international communist movement. So this is just like, this is literally a joint talk between them trying to increase the friendship between Soviet and Korean people. But at the same time, we can show you, and we have read on this channel before, parts of Kim Jong-il who was talking about critiquing, well, Khrushchev, talking about critiquing all of these reactionary leaders to USSR, talking about how they slandered Stalin. I'm going to try and find here, because I've got a little group, or I've got this quote here somewhere. I think attached to this. Yeah. I got this Malma study group. Let me just see if I can find this quote right quick. Because, like, even on the question of Stalin himself. Oh, here's a cool thing. Let me copy this image. It doesn't like to do that. Okay. Let's see. Where is my Stalin post here? You know, there's so many cool images here. Okay, check out this image right here, for example.
I would have been friends with Stalin.
Look at this one. This is kids in DPRK on their computer in the library. This kid's watching fucking Stalin, yo. What? This kid's watching Stalin. I love that picture. That kid is fucking watching Stalin. And here, another picture too, I'll show you. Right? And open this image in another tab. Okay, look, another one. This is DPRK textbooks. Wait, why did it open? Look at the DPRK textbooks here. Look. Who's this cool guy on the left? Lenin? Or Nikolai, I think? Nikolai, right?
Lenin. Nikolai Ilyich Ulyanov Lenin.
That's Lenin. That's Lenin right there. This is in their textbooks. So it's interesting, like, the way... Oh, look, we even got Stalin right in the goddamn textbook. There you go. The man himself. Now, let's see if I can find this quote. Okay, well, here's another one. 1953. I gotta find this one, though. Here we go. Here we go. I found it. I knew I would find it. Okay, this is a quote by Kim Jong-il right here, chat. So, I just want you so because that's only fair, right? This quote we're looking at here, they're trying to compare Enver Hoxha, right? We look at this. They're trying to compare Enver Hoxha, who is the leader of the Albanian party. They're trying to compare him to this joint communique between these two delegates, right? Okay, very unfair comparison. So now let's make a more fair comparison. Okay, cool. Enver Hoxha made that cool critique against Khrushchev. Okay, well, let's read from Kim Jong-il here. This is Kim Jong-il. He says, as days go by, our people are longing for him more eagerly, visiting his statues to lay wreaths and flowers and pay tribute to him. This was after Kim Il-sung died. I ensured that the mourning period was prolonged, in line of the people's wishes, and that they could continue to extend their condolences. In the mourning period, our people have nurtured the conviction that Comrade Kim Il-sung is always with them. We must ensure that they hold him in high esteem forever, and remain faithful to his will. If we undertake the work of holding him in high esteem for eternity, we can exert a significant influence on establishing a true communist moral outlook on the international communist movement. Communist morality is pure, noble, and genuine. The core of communist morality is loyalty to the leader. In the past, revisionists such as Khrushchev, who appeared in the international communist movement, seriously undermined communist morality. Khrushchev, by slandering Stalin, gave the negative impression to the world that communists were ignorant of their forerunners in the revolution and fought one another. Lenin, the founder of the first socialist state, is today slandered by renegade socialists, 70 years after his death. Similar phenomena have been witnessed in other parties in the international communist movement. As a result, the communists lost the people's trust and support, and this ended with the collapse of socialism in several countries. By holding Comrade Kim Il-sung in high esteem forever, even more than we did in his lifetime, we should demonstrate to the world the outlook on morality with which communists support their leaders. Thus, we can actively contribute to safeguarding and adding glory to the noblest communist morality, and to its worldwide rehabilitation, after it was marred by the revisionists and renegades of socialism. Kim Jong-il. And of course, they were saying very similar things about Khrushchev and other people in the USSR while the USSR existed as well in the 1960s, exactly the same time as this article was written. There's a reason why DPRK just didn't agree to certain things that the USSR requested of it, like agreeing to a certain agreement in production chain, whereby they would take care of more lower scale production and raw extraction, and USSR would take care of finished products. That was one thing that they rejected, right? Which is why people misread where DPRK was in the Sino-Soviet split. Simply put, DPRK didn't take sides in the Sino-Soviet split. They said, we don't have to take sides because revolution develops according to the independent conditions of each country. And now, who is more right in this? USSR, which doesn't exist, Albania, which also doesn't exist as a socialist country right now, or DPRK, which still exists as a socialist country right now. You know, the evidence does kind of speak for itself a little bit, doesn't it? So yeah, first thing, dishonest comparison right there. While for its part, the WPK accepted the Khrushchevite-led Communist Party of the Soviet Union as, here we go again, the universally recognized vanguard of the world communist movement. And you see what they're doing here again, because once again they're citing a Soviet-Korean joint communique from July 1961. So they're conflating a diplomatic agreement and diplomatic, look, how can I put this? What's a good example? Well, the US, right? Look at how the US just went to China. And it looked like it was very nice, right? There was like a celebration, there was people cheering, they played some songs for him, they walked around, they shook some hands, they had dinner, like all of these little nice things happened, right? But then when you got down to the material reality, what was it? 20 fucking planes, and none of the US corporations got a fucking single thing they wanted at all. Nothing, right? So that's why this is a dishonest fucking comparison. Because you're taking the leader who is laying down a political line for the party in Verhoeven, and then you're comparing it to these communications, which is essentially glazing another fucking party for the sake of maintaining diplomatic trade relations, etc. That has nothing to do with the political line that they're taking, which, as I just showed you, was critical of Khrushchev and was always positive of Stalin and Lenin. Korea never changed on that and saw that as being, they just also said, we will work with any parties that are willing to work with us. So the idea of that being proof of WPK accepting the Khrushchevite-led Communist Party as the Soviet Union as that thing is ridiculous. I got a real fiend question. Based police. What the hell does that mean? A fiend question? What the hell does that mean? I'm incredibly worried about what you're gonna ask me from now. There was exceptional citation work in scholarship, Larry. Thank you. Yeah, that's just not that's not a comparison that you can actually make. I got some old resin vapes with some residue. Should I lick that up with a cigarette and smoke it, or is that homeless behavior? I mean, bone dry. I mean, I'd be if I was in a position where I was thinking about it like that, chances are I'd be smoking it. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know. I don't know if I mean, put it on the end of the cigarette, or I would like, yeah, smear it on the paper. And I've done that many a times, just kind of like put it on the paper and light that up like that. You know? Yeah, and I mean, that was the other thing I was gonna say, you know, no pejorative against homeless, because been there, done that. Okay, and then, so what do we say here? Furthermore, Comrade Dermot Hudson holds that WPK saw modern revisionism originating in the 50s rather than as a phenomenon of the late 80s associated with Gorbachev. What? Okay, well, what does that have to do with the reality anyway? Oh, Gorbachev. I mean, this is what Dermot Hudson says, right? Okay. And yet, when Kim Il-sung visited the Soviet Union... Oh, and here we go, see? Again, this is a dishonest way of doing this. Because now they're saying again, and yet, when Kim Il-sung visited the Soviet Union, he said nice things while he was there. Right? Of course, he's not gonna go to fucking the Soviet Union and be like, you're all a bunch of goddamn, you know what I mean? Like, right to their face, in the same way that, like, Stalin, when he met with fucking, like, when he met with Churchill and these other fucking monsters, he wasn't like, you're all fucking these horrible monsters. It would have been funny. but it also wouldn't necessarily materially accomplished anything, and maybe it could have harmed relations, right? Like, that's the thing. It's not materially useful. This is just like people like wish casting for no reason at all. So just like, and yet, when Kim Il sung visited the Soviet Union in October 1986, he expressed support for the socioeconomic reforms adopted at the 27th Congress of the CPSU, and in his banquet speech, praised Gorbachev by saying, and then he says here in that speech, this is a new change taking place in the Soviet Union, unthinkable apart from the energetic activities of Comrade M.S. Gorbachev, a staunch Marxist-Leninist. So he said that at the banquet speech with Gorbachev in attendance. Like, come on. Come on. That's, like I say, that's just friendly fucking diplomatic relations. You can't take that as proof of a political line and proof of revisionism of the party. If the DPRK had criticisms of the USSR, there is no way they should be dealing with them diplomatically according to still shared principles. That never happens in geopolitics. Exactly. I mean, these are the same people who will be like, oh, well, China trades with capitalist countries, so therefore, how could it be socialist? Huh? Checkmark. Dengist. Right? Same, it's the same fucking shit. It's just for Korea instead. And then we also have this right here. Lenin's definition of revisionism is that it is, quote, a trend hostile to Marxism within Marxism. Yeah, okay, sure. Perhaps a more comprehensive definition of revisionism would be that it is an ideology which claims to be a development of Marxism, but it is in reality a deviation from Marxism which assists the anti-socialist aims of the capitalist class. Sure. Or you could say revisionism is that which claims to be Marxism, but in actuality serves imperialism, right? That's revisionism. So there we go. Now we're getting to it. That's the definition of revisionism. It's that which cloaks itself in in the language of Marxism. Well, right? That says comprehensive should have revised your article for typos. That's funny. Get him, Frank. You got him. Yeah, but this is, and that's, I mean, Frank here, that got me into a good segue with that, because that is what most people think. That it means revising any aspect suited to your own conditions of Marxism, Leninism. Sometimes people conflate that as that means revisionism. Any change of existing texts of Marxism, Leninism is revisionism. It's not. What is revisionism is particularly those things which claim to be an advance or an application of Marxism, Leninism, which actually serve imperialism or strengthening capitalism. Okay? And right now, let me ask you something. Can we overcome capitalism individually? Or for global capitalism, and thus even capitalist relations in one's own country, to completely disappear, we must get rid of imperialism. At least imperialism is the dominant main force of the world, right? Because otherwise, how do you engage in actually getting the things you need on a globalized market of capitalist imperialism? Right? That's why imperialism has to be done away with before you can talk about undoing capitalism. So it's important to center imperialism in your definition of revisionism, in my opinion. So, they say, clearly revisionism has direct relevance only to people who believe they are Marxists, to the extent that it can persuade such people of its validity. It separates him from genuine Marxists and diverts him into anti-Marxist political activity. The struggle against revisionism is thus important the period of building Marxist-Leninist party in countries where such a party does not exist yet. Some comrades have no difficulty recognizing the revisionist character of Khrushchevite revisionism, of the type of the British Road of Socialism, which is clearly anti-revolutionary, but cannot understand how other types of revisionism may support revolution. But when we say, so, what? First of all, what are they saying here? Do you see that? You see? We're already getting into a fucking conundrum. An oxymoron of logistical paradoxes here. But, I just gotta read this part again. Okay. Some comrades have no difficulty recognizing the revisionist character of Khrushchevite revisionism of the type of the British Road of Socialism, which is clearly anti-revolutionary, right? But cannot understand how other types of revisionism may support revolution? That sentence breaks me. Because literally, revisionism is counter-revolutionary. How can you say revisionism supports revolution? That is nonsense. Revisionism may support revolution in, like, language. That is what revisionism does altogether. So then they say, but when we say that revisionism assists the anti-socialist aims of the capitalist class, one must understand that the anti-socialist aims of all capitalist classes do not follow an identical pattern. And we can identify different brands of revisionism corresponding to these different aims. So, okay, I see where they're getting at now. Let me ask you this question though, chat. I'm just wondering if people's thoughts in here, okay? Oh my god! Oh, at the end of this paragraph is really good. Oh, you can't see the whole text. Do you even want to see the whole text? Okay, I need to ask you something. Chat, do you believe that there is a capitalist class in DPRK? One in chat. No. Yeah, one in chat if you think there's a capitalist class in DPRK. Two in chat if you think the capitalist class has been expropriated within the borders of DPRK. Because this is what doesn't make sense about this. You think that there's Rena, you think that there's a capitalist class inside of DPRK? Do you care to Really? Virgin King as well believes that there's a capitalist class inside the DPRK. Okay. See, I don't believe that. I believe that their capitalists have been expropriated. There are certain elements of like capitalist representatives from our class try and sneak in, but like, for example, the last time the Navy SEALs went in there, they had to kill on sight because they were so afraid of being seen by any Korean citizens. There's no individual owners of anything. That's not what makes someone a capitalist. A capitalist doesn't mean individual owner of a thing. A capitalist means somebody who owns the means of production, who benefits from the means of production. I'm not asking about China. But I'm not asking about China, though. And you're gonna have to define what you mean by individual owners of anything. It's not a strongly held belief, but I think it's more possible than not that it exists in some form. Yes, an individual capitalist doesn't mean that they have a political class either. Yes, which is a whole nother conversation as well. I believe that there's remnants of the capitalist class in DPRK, but I don't believe that there is a capitalist class even in the terms that there is in China and DPRK. I think there's descendants, the remnants, who might have some um additional material wealth tucked away compared to other people, but there is no such thing as like a restaurant owned by an individual person in DPRK. There's no such thing. Like, people can go to a trade play, like, can go to certain markets uh in uh Raison and other places, but they can't employ anybody else. They don't own businesses. No individual can own a business in DPRK. It's even more strict than Cuba in that sense. There's no individually owned restaurants. There's no such thing as getting an individually owned company of any kind. There can be collective, cooperative ownership, and there can be, which right now only really exists in the farms, and there can also be state ownership. Those are the two forms of property other than individual private ownership, which is just personal ownership. So, no, DPRK doesn't have capitalists, essentially. I mean, it has remnants. Does North Korea have any classes still? I mean, yeah, there's different subclasses and but really what you're dealing with in any kind of society, when, like, it has subclasses, but it doesn't have an oppressor class anymore. That oppressor class has been done away with. And this is something that you're going to see distorted in this article. And what a lot of people get wrong is that DPRK says that when they've reached the stage they are at, where property relations have been completely transformed, your class struggle then transforms. Class struggle goes on, but it transforms into one of all of the working masses who are united around the working class idea, and more being transformed into working class themselves. The goal is to transform all the people into those working class elements. Meanwhile, at the same time, you have to identify elements hostile to those working masses. Because once you reach that stage of revolution, those elements become the hostile elements in the masses. And that was the difference between Khrushchev's opening up, Khrushchev's reforms, and what Korea has done. Like, when Khrushchev made a party of the whole state, right? When Khrushchev made a party of the whole state, they didn't do so guided by the understanding of the working class ideology. They were making way for imperialist and bourgeois ideology to have certain influence of society. And that's why Khrushchev's is different than the US is, or than Korea making a mass party, because their mass party is still guided by working class proletarian ideology. It just understands that you reach a certain point where the property relations have been transformed, and so now those hostile elements of the masses constitute a minority. And the way you fight against them is by fighting against corruption, fighting against those elements that don't seek to serve the masses and improve their living standards. Which, by the way, you can see China starting to enter this phase themselves. Has North Korea gotten rid of profit then? Well, the state still has to, like, make profit in a sense in order to be able to reinvest in other places. Like, it depends on what you mean by profit. If you mean in the sense that it can then go reinvest into other things to reinvest into other things, then no, it reinvests in order to improve its ability to serve people. But but as long as it exists, as long as it has to exist within like the larger globalized capitalist structure, it does have to make some profit to be able to trade on the market as well. London Smash, welcome in. So that's probably what they're going to talk about here. And that's why, I mean, this is going to get pretty insidious, it looks like, from here. But does that make sense? Does that make sense? So deep. And yes, China has capitalists still, but those capitalists are without political power and they can't coalesce into a party. They can't coalesce into a class. Their capitalist class has been eradicated. They exist as individuals who were essentially being constantly undermined by the socialist state. And like I was saying, you can see this starting to be done in China in the way that China is constantly fighting these anti-corruption drives, which also undermines the ability of those capitalists to negatively have influence in the Communist Party of China. That's what the anti-corruption drives are for. And at the same time, in order to strengthen labor laws, right? Because you have to remember that China, it's not just up to the Communist Party of China. They don't just have direct hold of all state organs. So it's not up to them to just say, all right, we have to do this thing now. Boom. And then it becomes law, right? They have to understand that people build the revolution, the masses. And people build the revolution by having the revolutionary consciousness raised. Which is why China understood that the Gang of Four were taking a wrong dogmatic viewpoint. And it wouldn't have led to a difference of different ways of socialism developing. It would have led to a failure of socialism if they had taken the road of the Gang of Four. Because the party, it cannot lead by orders and decrees, and it cannot lead by bribing people. The party can only lead by correctly understanding the way forward and leading people in the direction they're trying to go, the progressive elements of the masses. Because the ruling party, the Labor Party, the Workers' Party of Korea, the Communist Party of China, those parties, of course, are the workers' parties. So they represent the best elements of those workers, the most conscious elements of the workers, who are leading the rest of the workers forward. And they're doing that by having their party members go among society and trying to educate them and bring them closer and closer to the party line. Which is why it's such a ridiculous thing for people to say, well, why is China's market socialist economy such a long stage of revolution? You're asking the wrong question. And you're focused on, like, a small thing that Marx once said in Critique of the Gotha program about that socialism is one no commodity production, which is not what he really was saying. Anyway, he was just making a point. He was just making a point against the Gotha program. That's why it's called Critique of the Gotha program. But Marx was always very careful to say he was not a utopian, right? He couldn't predict the future. They knew a few generalized things about socialism and higher stage communism, a few very broad predictions, but they can't actually predict that future. And that's why Critique of the Gotha program as some criteria of whether China is socialist or not is the wrong idea. Socialism does what capitalism can never do. It raises people's living standards and develops the productive forces at the same rate that capitalism can, without the exploitation and without the oppression of other countries and the colonial violence and the imperial violence. And China proves that without a shadow of a doubt. China has proven that. Look at the anti-poverty drive that they've done, right? Look at the masses of people that they've uplifted out of poverty, all while undermining the fucking imperialist order. Right? And that's what's important to understand. Whereas the opposite happens in capitalist countries. You cannot both develop the productive forces at the rapid pace that you see under capitalism without colonial extraction and without imperialist super profits, and then give your workers the benefits that we have. And the proof of that is as more and more revolutions win in the global south, and as more of them get closer to China at the same time, we see them rolling back all of those measures here as literal proof of that. Because those super profits, on top of the already falling rate of profit, causes them to need to buckle down on the fascism, if you will. Whereas China, the opposite has happened. People are feeling more and more free all the time, right? You know? So, yeah, does that make sense? I thought China is currently in class struggle because of the prevalence of capitalists. Yeah, it is in class struggle. But this is the thing that Maoists get wrong. They misunderstand class struggle and think that when socialism is established, class struggle stays the same. That's the mistake. It doesn't, right? Once the working class has upper hand in state power, class struggle changes completely. Because we have the upper hand. So once we have our own state power, the strongest weapon of our class struggle is to make a government that serves the people. Because that's intolerable to those individualist former elements even of the capitalist class who want to only serve their own interests, who have the tendency of wanting to serve their interests. Eventually, either even without themselves knowing it, that serving the people militantly, that all the officials be servants of the people and not be career seekers, etc., not be there for the fame, that those things literally those are the things that cause these reactionaries to eventually reveal themselves, because they engage in illegal and illicit activity like stealing from the state, trying to undermine activities, trying to undermine policies, trying to form little factions and stuff like that. And rooting out those corrupt elements is fighting against the capitalist class from reforming their own group. And that's what China's doing. And it's raised more and more all the time. It's getting more militant all the time, right? So that's what I'm saying. That's what the class struggle in China is the same as it is in Korea because of the establishment of a socialist state. That is to make a government that serves the people. That's a radical difference to a government that serves capital. That's the revolutionary. It sounds simple, right? It sounds like a no-brainer, but that's the revolutionary change. You have to turn the party and the government into a motherly party that serves the people's interests, that puts things in their state that's like, we have to serve the people's livelihoods, which a capitalist class, like, they don't give a fuck, right? You know what I mean? Does that make sense? So, like, the class struggle continues, but it continues in different forms. One where it's not about now identifying the oppressor class versus the oppressed class. It's one where the formerly oppressed class has now become the master of society. And the popular masses are rallied behind them. And they're giving the popular masses the leadership. And all of the popular masses have become working people. And the only elements that are not popular working masses under socialist society are those elements that become hostile to it. Because everybody else is contributing to society in the way that the national plan, which is reflective of the level of consciousness that the masses are at in any given revolution, that those, even the American socialist economy itself adheres to that plan, that it serves that plan. And that's again what China's market economy does. In a sense, their market economy, it doesn't even it's not even in contrast to the socialist system itself. Their market economy serves their socialist system and strengthens their socialist revolution. That's the wonderful thing about it, right? It's solving the contradictions of capitalism, and it's taking the whole of society with it. Even if the entirety of the former capitalist class has been abolished, along with its vestigial components, there would still be a class struggle against international capitalism in its imperialist stage. Yeah, and even with the and not only that, but the longest stage of transformation, remember, has to do with ideology, with people's ideological consciousness. And the longest form of transformation, longer than the material gains, longer than even the transformation of the property relations, is the transformation of people. The remolding of us into socialist-minded people, making everybody like the communists. That's the longest stage of the struggle. Because, and that's why you have to have leaders and unity behind that leadership, something for people to model themselves around, etc., until you reach this higher stage of communism where people are completely different. Right? Now they have been transformed into socialist-minded people. Remember that against the human nature people. Sure, human nature is remoldable, and what we want to do is remold it back into something that coincides with our reality that we actually live in. And that's what Marxism-Leninism is all about. Restoring that. Kim Jong-il really says it well here is also. The phrase, the masses of the people, assumes a class character in class society. An exploiter society is divided into exploiter class and the exploited class, or the ruling class and the ruled class, depending on who owns the means of production and who controls state power. The exploited class, the ruled class, forms the majority of the masses of the people. The class structure of the masses of people is not immutable. It changes as social history develops. In capitalist society, not only workers and peasants, but also working intellectuals, and many other classes and strata which champion and struggle for independence, form the masses of people. That's us. In socialist society, all people are transformed into socialist working people. So everyone is a member of the masses of the people. Okay? So hear that? So in socialist society, like DPRK, and yes, China today, in socialist society, even those capitalists right now have been transformed into socialist working people. So everyone in China, everyone in DPRK is a member of the masses of people. Is this denying class struggle? Well, the article we're reading says it does. But look at the very next part and tell me if you think this is denying class struggle now. He says, of course, in socialist society too, the maneuvers of minor hostile elements continue, and traitors may appear in the revolutionary ranks. Therefore, it is also necessary in socialist society to clearly distinguish between the masses of the people and the elements hostile to them. Well, if that's not class struggle, what is? Right? If you're not considering everybody to be a united member of the masses, and then you're discovering those elements hostile to the progressive development of the masses, how is that not class struggle? In this is what I like about Juche. Because Maoism pretends to understand class struggle under socialism, while being something that developed outside of China, outside of the actual experience of socialist society, I think it falls short of being able to do that. And that's my problem with Marxism, Leninism, Maoism. And hoaxism for that matter. Whereas I think this is a much better analysis and a much more universal analysis, most importantly, of what class struggle means under a socialist system. Because again, If you look at China, this applies. Look at Cuba, this applies. That's why I'm saying, like, this Juche is such a great analysis of existing socialism. Because Juche existed and it developed through the course of defending and developing Korean socialism. And that's why I'm saying Marxism-Leninism, we study that so that we can understand and fight imperialism. If you want to better understand socialism itself, you don't study Critique of the Gotha program, although that's a great read to read, but you study Juche, because that is what that philosophy exists for, you see. And that's what I love about it. And so, yeah, let's look more at this article now. So, then he says in this article, in particular, the aims of revisionists in developed capitalist countries differ from those of revisionists in colonial type countries. You can almost hear the fucking derision. Thus, the former is anti-revolutionary, typified by Khrushchevite revisionism, and the type of British road to socialism. However, revisionism of colonial type countries is to a certain extent revolutionary, reflecting the desire of national bourgeoisies of colonial type countries to carry through the national democratic stage of the revolutionary process in such countries, but to halt the revolutionary process before it proceeds to the socialist stage. So, their argument here is that it wasn't the working class that led the revolution in China. It wasn't the working class that led the revolution in Korea. No. It was the national bourgeoisies of the colonial type countries that actually led the revolution, and then they stopped short of actually reaching socialist revolution. Again, in a country like Korea that has no private property of the capitalist type. It has no capitalist property relations in the country, essentially. But okay, somehow they stopped short. And you know why? This is so silly, because what they're doing is conflating all of the existing anti-colonial revolutions with that of the French Revolution, and saying, well, they all failed for the same reason, sort of. Just in a different context, for colonial type reasons. It's... like, you can't have... This is the thing. Let me put it another way. If you had revisionism in your colonial type of revolution, Korea wouldn't be in the position it is now. It would be a friend of the US. Anyway. So, however, revisionism in colonial countries is to a certain extent revolutionary, reflecting the desires of the national bourgeoisie of colonial countries to carry through the national democratic stage of the revolutionary process, which is where they're saying they are now. This is the second form of revisionism. It is typified by Mao Zedong thought, and as we shall see, Kim Il-sungism. In some important respects, Kim Il-sungism is fully in accord with the Marxist-Leninist principles of the revolutionary process in colonial-type countries. These principles are, firstly, that the revolutionary process in such countries consists of two stages. And see, now they're going to cite all of these works as being proof. No, this is a hoaxism, a hoaxist author. They're going to cite now all of these now quotes of why this isn't proof why they're not socialist now. Here we go. So in the first stage, the Korean people are fast with the task of carrying out the anti-imperialist, anti-feudal democratic revolution. Kim Il-sung, on building a new Korea and the United National Front. Comrade Kim Il-sung pointed out the need to continue the revolution after the completion of the anti-imperialist, anti-feudal democratic revolution, so as to build the socialist communist society, which it is currently doing. Secondly, that the Marxist-Leninist Party should strive to mobilize the maximum of class forces objectively possible for each stage of revolution. And here's Lenin. It is possible to conquer the more powerful enemy only by necessarily thoroughly, carefully, attentively, and skillfully taking advantage of every, even the smallest opportunity of gaining a mass ally, even though this ally may be temporary, facilitating, unstable, unreliable, and unconditional. Those who do not understand this fail to understand even a grain of Marxism, which we will see that is what this article is doing. And Stalin. The Communist Party of each country must unfailingly avail itself of even the smallest opportunity of gaining a mass ally for the proletariat, even if a temporary, facilitating, unstable, and unreliable ally. Okay, fine. We're all on the same page there. Thirdly, in the first stage of revolutionary process, this democratic stage, these forces include the national bourgeoisie. Yes, it includes them. Not led by them, though. Important distinction right there, by the way, that many orthodox Marxists and hoaxists and others don't understand or refuse to understand. To build a democratic people's republic, a united front must be formed of all the patriotic democratic forces, including the national capitalists. Yep, nothing wrong with that. The national capitalists participated in the democratic revolution. Yeah, again, nothing wrong with that. Fourthly, that the party should strive again to gain the leadership of this stage of the revolution. And they already have the lead of the revolution, in the case of Korea especially. In the struggle to establish Democratic People's Republic, the communists should be at the head of the masses of the people and lead them forward. And see, we've already got a little bit of a leading of the question here, I guess, leading your thoughts, right? Fourthly, that the party should strive to gain the leadership of this stage of revolution. Well, the party already did that. If you know about Korean history, you know this. And now here we go, the juicy parts. The revisionist facets of Kim Il-sungism. The revisionist facets of Kim Il-sungism relate to the period of the transition to the socialist revolution and to socialist revolution itself. Okay, let's find out how. According to Marxism-Leninism, socialism can only be constructed only through the establishment of the dictatorship of the proletariat. Aha! Well, clearly then. Gotcha, DPRK. Between capitalists and blah, 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 whatever, Communist International. Yeah, we know. The revolution will be unable to crush the resistance of the bourgeoisie to maintain its victory and to push forward to the final victory of socialism unless at a certain stage in its development it creates a special organ in the form of the dictatorship of the proletariat as its principal mainstay. Now here we go. They're gonna disprove it with these two quotes right here. Are you ready for this? It's gonna disprove all of Juche in just two, not even complete quotes. Not even complete quotes, and they're about to smash Juche completely. Here we go. According to Kim Il-sungism, however, the dictatorship of the proletariat is unnecessary in a colonial type country like Korea. Is that what they said? Is that what they said? Well, let's prove it. Here's the proof that that's what they said. Okay? Kim Il-sung, quote, "The democracy we aspire to is fundamentally different from that of Western capitalist countries, nor is it a slavish copy of that in a socialist country. Ours is a new type of democracy, most suited to the reality of Korea." And now, this part right here is perhaps the most insidious way they're trying to say this. The establishment of power of the proletarian dictatorship by force was followed as a last resort in some countries. In the northern half of Korea, this was not necessary. Baek Bong, Kim Il Sung Biography, Volume 2, Beirut. So there we go. So, let me ask you. Are either of these quotes, chat, I need to know, does anyone agree, one in chat if you agree, do you think either of these quotes is saying that that the dictatorship of the proletariat is unnecessary? Japan was dismantled by force, yes. But do you think either of these quotes is saying that the dictatorship of the proletariat is unnecessary? Because I don't. And I'll tell you why I don't. Because first of all, Kim Il Sung here is saying that the democracy we aspire to is not like Western capitalist countries, nor is it a slavish copy. Right? He's very careful with the words here. Nor is it a slavish copy of that in a socialist country. See that? So he's saying that it's not a slavish copy. Ours is a new type of democracy most suited to the realities of Korea. Just like China is a new type of democracy most suited to the realities of China. Karl Marx literally said that socialism everywhere would have to deal first with its national questions. Even though he said the workers have no nation or whatever. He still said that if you read the Communist Manifesto. That last one makes sense because taking it by force is what we end up having to do because the capitalist class fight back, right? Yes, tempora. Exactly. So this is the part, and this is the insidious part. They're, again, trying to prove that according to Kim Il Sungism, dictatorship of the proletariat is unnecessary. But right here, if you actually read this carefully, you see that they're talking about establishing the proletarian dictatorship. They're not saying it's unnecessary. He says the establishment of the power of the proletarian dictatorship by force was followed as a last resort in some countries. In the northern half of Korea, this was not necessary. See that? So he's not saying that the dictatorship of the proletariat was not established. He is saying that the dictatorship of the proletariat was not established by force. Oh, curious. Why would he be saying that, chat? Could it have anything to do with the fact that the Korean bourgeoisie was more disconnected than any other bourgeoisie? Thanks to the fact that, let's see, Japanese colonialism, other than those Japanese compradors, what happened after Japanese colonialism? Well, they ran to the south, as we know. Pretty famously, right? Those that stayed in the north, those national bourgeoisie that stayed in the north, they got bombed. Pretty much any property, any farmland, any buildings worth speaking of were essentially decimated by a genocidal bombing, you see. And so the capitalists had nothing left. They had some paper, maybe? Some of them had some papers left that said, we own this land. And the proletariat was saying, we own this land. Already, right? They were forcibly saying, we own this land. Were they really going to stand in their way and say, no, we own this land? They have no upper hand. They have no international connections. They have two options. Run and join their fucking little puppets in the south and become a traitor of their people, like the ones who are the former Japanese collaborators who already ran, or get on board with the program of Kim Il-sung and these revolutionaries. It was an existential choice for them, you see. So that's why it didn't have to happen by force. because they didn't fight back. Because they were bombed in a genocidal fucking campaign by US imperialists. Like, does this author not know the history of DPRK at all? Accordingly, they say now, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, established in North Korea in September 1948, was officially described as state based on the joint dictatorship of several classes, including the national capitalists. A democratic people's republic must be built. Look at all the dots. Look at all the dots. This is so dishonest. Just the dots. Look at the dots in this quote. ... I'm gonna read the ... dots out loud because that will make this more effective. Okay. Here's the quote here. Them proving that they did a state of all the people just like Khrushchev did, is what they're trying to say here. So, quote, a democratic people's republic ... must be built by forming a democratic united front ... which embraces ... even the national capitalists. So, is that what it's saying? Is that what it's saying? Is the Democratic People's Republic the state or the country? Or is it both? And Branson, welcome in. It's both, right? The Democratic People's Republic is the state of the working people of the DPRK, obviously. And it's also a country, whereby those former hostile elements exist, whether you like them to or not. You can't Thanos snap them out of existence. You have to overcome them through class struggle. Are these people for class struggle or not for class struggle? I don't understand it. Is history in constant motion or is it static? Do you just flick a switch and you go from being capitalist to being socialist? I don't understand this logic, right? How can you say that it's a state for all the people? When, again, like, I showed you the quotes just a little while ago, right here. Oh, not those ones. By Kim Jong-il here, explaining how when they talk about the masses of people, that assumes a class character. And they say that in socialist society, all people transformed into socialist working people. So everyone is a member of the masses of the people. Of course, in socialist society too, the maneuvers of minor hostile elements continue, and traitors may appear in the revolutionary ranks. Therefore, it is necessary to, in socialist society, clearly distinguish between the masses of the people and the elements hostile to them. It's class struggle to a T. Literally talking about class struggle. Yes, this is espresso Stalinist. So again, what we have here is just a dishonest, out of context quote. He's talking about a democratic people's republic, which potentially includes the South, by the way, because he's talking about potential reunification at this time, right? And it says, must be built by forming a democratic front, which embraces even the national capitalists. That doesn't say that they're not engaging in class struggle. This is part of the series, I think.
What's it gonna be?
Were you the one who linked Espresso Stalinist?
I choose drugs!
Yes.
Drugs!
Specifically a hoaxist critique. Yes, you were. Okay. Yeah, so you're the one who started this next multi-week series. I'm looking at the time of the stream and I'm realizing I can't even do all this today. This is gonna take multiple I'm gonna take multiple streams of me just like hammering into this fucking article. But it needs to be done because everybody loves to link this one. And I do think it needs to be talked about. And so he's gonna quote Lenin here. and says, according to Marxism-Leninism, dictatorship is of the proletariat. And so he's going to do this comparing the quotes here. Okay? So look, I love when they say things like this. This is the best part. However, in violation, they violated Marxism-Leninism. Lenin turning over in his grave right now. He's violated. They violated Lenin. However, in violation of these Marxist-Leninist principles, by 1958, the leadership of the WPK was presenting this state of the joint dictatorship of several classes, including the national bourgeoisie, as belonging to the category of the dictatorship of the proletariat. Uh-oh! Let's read. Here we go. The proof. Some people say that our people's power is not one that exercises the dictatorship of the proletariat, because it is based on a united front. This is a completely erroneous view. Today, our people's power is a state power that belongs in the category of the dictatorship of the proletariat. Huh? But wait, that quote's correct though. I know. Wait a second. Gibble Sung. That's alright. I'm gonna read this again. I gotta read this. I don't understand what the problem is. Okay, maybe I need to. Okay, I better read the Lenin quote. I guess. Let's compare the quotes because I'm lost now. Okay, here we go. The class that took political power did so in the knowledge that it was doing so alone. That is intrinsic to the concept of dictatorship of the proletariat. It has meaning only when one class knows that it is taking power alone. Okay. Sure, Lenin. That was a speech delivered at the All-Russian Congress of Transport Workers. And here's Stalin. The class of proletarians, ... does not and cannot share power with other classes. Okay. Let me ask you something then before we continue. Right? Is this saying that the working class is sharing power with other classes? Right? A democratic people's republic, ... must be built by forming a democratic united front which embraces even the national capitalists. Is that saying share state power with the capitalists? Or is that saying we must form a democratic united front for the reunification of Korea, an anti-imperialist struggle that also includes those national capitalists in that struggle, that embraces those people in the struggle? Now let me ask you then. Nope, united front is not the same as state power. No. Exactly. Okay, good. So then let me ask you, right? I'm glad that we understand that. So, who would be leading this united front? When we form a united front of any socialist party, any communist, when we do that, who is seeking to lead that united front in any instance? Communists, right? And thus, by extension, because what are the communists? Again, what is the Communist Party?
It's called capitalism, jackass. You don't like it? Go back to Cuba, comrade.
Yeah, that's right. But what are the communists, right? They're the general staff. They're in the Communist Party, meaning they're the general staff of the working class. So communists going in those united fronts is literally us trying to lead those united fronts. So while we're embracing national capitalists in the anti-imperialist struggle or in whatever struggle, we're not allowing them to have say in the leadership or stay in the state power. We're embracing them. Right? And what's funny is you go back, right? I'll go back right here for a second. And I want to read you this again. Right quickly. Right here. Listen to this quote. They've contradicted themselves. This is worse than Trotsky's writing. Look at this. It says, I've posting again, found a version on Marxist.org said the translation is different. The working class is the core, and which embraces the broad masses of the peasantry, patriotic intellectuals, and even the native capitalists who possess a national consciousness. So not obviously embracing capitalists. I don't like the ellipsis obfuscating concept. Yeah, and me either, Tempora. But even with them trying to do that, we can see it's not saying what they want. And right here is a golden quote that we already read before. Speaking of Cuba, literally ran into a pro-Batista Cuban today. Ugh. Elmira, I hope you're okay. I would take a shower, because that's fucking disgusting. You might need a wash after that interaction. Yeah, so what's funny is this is a quote that we've already read in this, right? Right here. I love this. I love this because look at this quote that we've already read. The Communist Party of each country must unfailingly avail itself of even the smallest opportunity of gaining a mass ally for the proletariat, even if a temporary, vacillating, unstable, and unreliable ally. Hello? Did you not put that quote in this same article? Right here. The one right before by Lenin is even more damning, for God's sakes. It is possible to conquer the more powerful enemy only by necessarily, thoroughly, carefully, attentively, and skillfully taking advantage of every, even the smallest opportunity of gaining a mass ally. Even though this ally may be temporary, vacillating, unstable, unreliable, and conditional. Oh my God. Those who do not understand this fail to understand even a grain of Marxism. Huh. Well, I guess the people who put this article together don't understand a grain of Marxism, do they? Do they? Because they're literally in the very next section critiquing Kim Il-sung for doing that same thing in practice. You gotta be fucking shitting with me. How is this not done out of malice? Like that, I mean, it's probably not, but how could it not be done out of malice? You know? They literally, yeah, I mean, it's again, that's what's funny is that they already established the need to make a democratic run, even with the most problematic, vacillating, conditional allies. And then they go on to critique Kim Il-sung, saying that he's sharing state power, that they're leading with him, blah, blah, blah. Because he said a democratic People's Republic must be formed by forming a democratic united front, which embraces, which apparently is a mistranslation even the national capitalists. Bro, that's what Stalin and Lenin just told them to do. Come the fuck on here. Right? Exactly. The agenda bias is so strong they can't even properly interpret the information that's right in front of them. It's devious. It's truly devious. And like I say, they might not even be doing it maliciously, which makes it devious to themselves. They're being devious to themselves. Right? You're hurting yourself. Why are you doing this to yourself? You're jumping through all these hoops when you could just like study it and like understand it, you know? Oh my God. Like, you're just like jumping through hoops to be as white as possible, aren't you? At this point. It's like, how white of an interpretation of Juche can we make here? Let's find out. However, in violation, they violated the principles of Marxism-Leninism. Okay, then. Yeah, because
I've got some literature in my car that will change your whole way of thinking.
and here's the proof again. What happened there? Oh, Glitter Snatch, thank you so much for the resubby, comrade. The Trotsky voice is activating. I mean, this is the Kim Il-sung quote right here. Look, here's the proof of them violating the Marxist-Leninist principles. They said, quote, here he is. Ready? Kim Il-sung. Chat, point out the part where he's violating it, okay? Please, for me. I can't find it. You point out the part of this quote where he's violating Marxist-Leninist principles. Let's see if we can find it. Here we go. I'm gonna read it slow. Real slow. Some people say that our people's power. So some people are saying, some people say this. Some people say that our people's power is not one that exercises the dictatorship of the proletariat because it is based on a united front. So some people say this. But Kim Il-sung is saying this is a completely erroneous view. Today, our people's power is a state power that belongs in the category of the dictatorship of the proletariat. He's even using the French word proletariat. What the hell? Where is the contradiction? Some people say that our people's power. Where's the violation of Marxist-Leninist principles? However, in violation of Marxist-Leninist principles, by 1958, leadership of WPK was presenting this state of the joint dictatorship of several classes. Oh, right. Okay, we somehow established the joint dictatorship of several classes. I mean, I think we can throw it out based on that right there. Let's see. What else do we got? In violation... Oh, God. Marxism-Leninism holds that in the transition from national democratic stage to revolutionary process to the socialist stage... Look, ... the proletariat pushes aside the national bourgeoisie. In violation of this Marxist-Leninist principle, Kim Il-sungism holds that the transition to the socialist stage of the revolutionary process can be carried through in continued alliance with the national bourgeoisie. Quote, entrepreneurs and traders of our country are fellow travelers, not only in carrying out the democratic revolution, but also in socialist construction. Again, that doesn't say what he just... That doesn't say that. In violation of this, Kim Il-sungism holds that the transition to the socialist stage of the revolutionary process can be carried through in continued alliance. This is not saying in alliance. Again, because he's saying the entrepreneurs and traders of our country are fellow travelers. You see, they're being led by who? Anyone know? Who are they being led by? That's right. The working class ideology, which currently in Korea is not led by the working class, which constitutes the whole society, but is being led by the Revolutionary Army. Guess where else the Revolutionary Army is leading the revolution? China. It's true. Not just the working class, but the actual working class Revolutionary Army, which engages in socialist construction there as well. It is in many ways the face of the party that the people know most readily, in addition to their representatives that they elect to as delegates. Yeah. So, again, this is not saying what it's saying. Okay, here's another one. From the beginning of our policy, our policy in regard to the national bourgeoisie was not only to carry on the anti-imperialist, anti-feudal democratic revolution, but also take them along with us to a socialist, communist society. Take them along with us. That doesn't say they're going to be leading with us. That means they're coming along with us. We're gonna do the same thing. China's doing the same thing. All of those elements are literally been taken along with them. Yes, to communism. And no individual capitalist, no individual former member of the capitalist class can change that. They are going along to socialism and communism irregardless. Yes. There's nothing incorrect about that. Okay, maybe this one will be it then. The national capitalists, quote, 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 quote. The national capitalists, ... came out in support of the party's line of socialist revolution. The party's line of socialist revolution. Why do they have it written like this? The National Capitalists came out in support of the party's line of socialist revolution. So again, that's 3 times now, right? He's not talking about the capitalists leading or even having any part of leading the revolution. Even in these out of context quotes, even taking them like this. The National Capitalists came out in support of the party's line on socialist revolution. Well, guess what? Okay, you're not going to like this. Maybe you're not going to like what I got to say right now. If I'm going to be like Kim Il-sung, and I'm going to carefully choose words where if you listen to my words, it will make sense. Okay? Trust me on this. Trust me on this. If you listen to my words, it's going to make sense. If the capitalists, if the capitalists in any country, Canada, let's say, if the capitalists in Canada came out materially in support of the party's line on socialist revolution, would we support that? Or would we be against that? I think that if we were able to convince capitalists to get on board with, actually socialist revolutionary transformation of society, we would, yeah, of course, with heavy scrutiny, of course, because those elements that aren't doing that, but this is the thing, right, Trill? That heavy scrutiny exists because those elements that fail to serve the people, for example, well, you're expelled from the party, aren't you? Right? That's part of the anti-corruption drive. You would be found out as a corrupt element of the party, and you would be expelled from the party. And so that's what I'm saying, right? Just like China, for example. Did you know that China, they had a different strategy for the last emperor of China than did, the Bolsheviks, for example? Perhaps you're familiar with this already. Yeah? I think I've got a meme here for it. Let me see. Let's see how far away that. Yeah, here we go. I got a meme for it right here. Look. See? Here. Russian communists dealing with their monarch. Right? That's one option. Okay? Chinese communists dealing with their monarch. Get a job. And so in that way, their last monarch was made to serve the revolution. And in a sense, adopted the party's revolutionary line, the party's policy. And thus came to the former emperor, the last monarch of China, served the revolution in a sense. Not in a sense, he did. So, and this is why I talk about this all the time. What matters is not whether somebody comes from the working class. That does matter insofar as that plays an enormous, tremendous influence on their ideological consciousness, right? But the criteria... Spicy Pretzel, thank you so much for the gift sub to Sapatra. Appreciate that. But the criteria isn't what social class they come from. Right? It isn't what social background they have, what their social class is. That's not the criteria of whether somebody can fight in a ranks of revolution or not. What matters is not working class origin, but working class consciousness. And you can have a we all know this. Anybody who organizes in practice, or even those of you who organize online, those of you who talk to other people in any capacity, I'm sure you recognize that Like, there is that disconnect. I saw an interview with a Russian business owner once, and he was like, I'm a communist. When masses return to power, I won't stand against expropriation or whatever else is needed of me. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying we can't like go by what somebody's class origin is. And that's why I just laugh. Like, besides the fact that the ACP is wrong on the barista argument, that's why I just laugh at it. Because whether somebody is petty bourgeoisie, whether somebody is lumpen proletariat, whether somebody is intellectual class, or somebody is from whatever subclass or whatever else, right? Like, we have to understand that we should absolutely be trying to speak to everybody. And that we will fight in the trench of anybody who actually materially adopts revolutionary consciousness. Right? Whether they're from the petty bourgeoisie or even if they were from the big bourgeoisie somehow. If they adopted materially, actually, revolutionary ideology, then they would be fighting in support of the masses. They would be fighting in the and we welcome that. What matters is revolutionary consciousness. This is important with regard to petty bourgeois versus labor aristocracy. Yeah, the small petty bourgeois is much more likely to have consciousness than the labor aristocracy. Yeah, I mean, given our current conditions right now, especially when you're talking to petty bourgeois people of colonized communities, right? Yeah, 100%. Whereas the labor aristocracy oftentimes gets bribed and captured by various other false consciousnesses, I guess is the proper term. It's funny that they make these critiques when their leader, Jackson Hinkle, is a fucking rich, middle white, upper class. Well, I mean, that's why some of the other things that ACP says, though, Elmira, is stuff like, oh, homeless people are the new aristocracy. Right? Kim Il-sung. Look, this again. Kim Il-sungism. They're saying that this is Kim Il-sungism while accepting that there is a risk of class struggle. This is insidious. This is insidious right here. I'm gonna read you the thing again by Kim Jong-il because I'm gonna kind of speed through these parts because this is just silly. Kim Il-sungism while accepting that there is a risk of class struggle between the working class and the national bourgeoisie in a colonial type country, maintains that this can be resolved peacefully by remolding the national capitalists by education and persuasion into working people. So now let's listen to this and tell me if you think Kim Il-sung is worried about a risk of class struggle. That's what this, I'm gonna in fact like pin that because that's what they're accusing it of. Okay, they're saying that, there, boom. Kim Il-sungism, I'm gonna pin it. I'm gonna put it right there. Kim Il-sungism while accepting that there is a risk of class struggle. So they're worried about the risk, he's saying. And apparently this is the proof. Wow, this is fucking terrible. So this is the proof that they're worried about a risk of class struggle. The capitalist elements still remaining in town and country will have to be ... There it is. The ... remolded along socialist lines instead of expropriating them. Kim Il-sung, every effort for the country's reunification. For the country's reunification and for socialist construction in the northern half of the republic. Every effort for the country's reunification. So why would he be making this argument in regards to reunification with the South? The capitalist elements still remaining in town and country will have to be ... remolded along socialist lines. Obviously, It's because the proper way, where socialism can already be consolidated in the North, those are all ellipses. Well, whatever. The dot 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 is what I'm calling them. They're deleting shit. Fuck these people. So, anyway, they're talking about reunifying the country here. Right? So the idea, like what they're saying is that we can't be for forceful reunification of a country that is seeing itself as a separate country. We have one nation, but we have to recognize two countries. So therefore, the correct path to reunification and the potential to transform capitalist elements in the South for people, for Koreans in the South, is basically saying that what we have to be for is the peaceful remolding along socialist lines instead of expropriating them. Now, this also works with Koreans inside of DPRK as well, because again, the war fucking destroyed any semblance of like property or assets worth expropriating. Kim Han-gil. I don't even know who this is. What is opset? What is opset? What is this quoting? Huh? The socialist transformation in private and trade and industry proceeded in close combination with the remolding of men, with the result that private traders and manufacturers were reshaped into socialist working people. Again, I'm not seeing the problem yet. Since our party adopted a policy of transforming capitalist traders and manufacturers peacefully instead of expropriating them, the form of class struggle could not but assume a specific character. Class struggle attendant on the socialist transformation of capitalist trade and industry was unfolded mainly by means of persuasion and education. Socialist transformation of private trade and industry in Korea. So again, how is any of this saying that it's a... None of this is saying that they're making a state of all classes. Literally, all three of these quotes are talking about transforming the former capitalist elements into socialist working people. And now what is he saying? Wait. From 1955. They're making a... Okay. Until now, we Marxist-Leninists... This is from 1929. Until now, we Marxist-Leninists were of the opinion that between the capitalists of town and country on the one hand, and the working class on the other, there is an irreconcilable antagonism of interests. What is this word? Chat, if you know what this word is, please let me know. Internet says Kim Han-gil is a South Korean politician. So they're just quoting some South Korean politician without giving the actual source. Alright. But again, so you can tell who they're trying to appeal to then, with that line of not expropriating those producers in the South. Until now, this is Stalin now. Until now, we Marxist-Leninists were of the opinion that between the capitalists of town and country, on the one hand, and the working class on the other hand, there's an irreconcilable antagonism of interests. That is what the Marxist-Leninist theory of class struggle rests on. But according to Bakunin's theory of capitalist peaceful growth into socialism, all this is turned upside down. The irreconcilable class antagonism of class interests between the exploiters and exploited disappears. The exploiters grow into socialism. One thing or the other. Either Marx's theory of class struggle or the theory of capitalists growing into socialism. Okay, again, but they're not talking about capitalists growing into socialism. Do you see how, again, here, this is being insidious? It's taking this Stalin quote and saying, see? But they're talking about transforming former capitalist elements into socialist working people. So how is that in contradiction to what Stalin just said here? I don't know. I don't see the contradiction. They literally said that is the form of class struggle. Oh god, now we got Maoism. Okay. Our party adopted the line of transforming capitalist trade and manufacturing along socialist lines, and saw to it that the capitalist traders and manufacturers were drawn into diverse forms of the cooperative economy, in strict observance with the voluntary principle. The important demand of the voluntary principle to strictly guard against coercive methods in cooperativism and conduct this movement according to the free will of private traders and manufacturers. And there's Kim Hang-gil again. What is this socialist transformation and private trade? What is this book? What is this book? Is this the... Wait a sec. Just trying to see when this was written. Because... 1977. Okay. Just because we're weighing it against quotes that come after that and shit. So, of the 3 forms of cooperative introduced into Korea, 2 forms were open to national capitalists to join if they wish. In the second form, the national capitalists received what amounted to interest on the capital they brought with them when they entered into a cooperative. So they were forced to abide by socialist property law. They had to agree to socialist property law. The second form was semi-socialist form, in which the means of production were under both joint and private ownership, and both socialist distribution according to work done and distribution according to the amount of investment were applied. The third form was completely socialist form, in which only socialist distribution applied. What is this? Oh, is this? Yeah, I mean, this is one we're gonna do tomorrow. This is the precursor to it. Okay, well, anyway, we've already established that it's a different... This isn't against Marxism-Leninism. Oh god. Oh god, and here we go. Here's this part. Here's this part. Here's the part where they say they're brainwashed, essentially. Look. Yeah. Loyalty to the leader, Marxism-Leninism, condemns the concept of loyalty to an individual. As Stalin said in a letter of April 1930, "You speak of your devotion to me. I would advise you to discard your principle of devotion to persons." So here's the problem. They're not humble enough. It is not the Bolshevik way. Be devoted to the working class, its party, its state. That is a fine, useful thing. But do not confuse it with devotion to persons. This vain and useful bauble of weak-minded intellectuals. Stalin, 1930. So they're saying, look, in a talk with German Emil, he says, decisions of individuals are always or nearly one-sided decisions. Out of every 100 decisions taken by individual persons, without being tested and corrected collectively, approximately 50 are one-sided. Here we go. In contrast to this, Kim Il-sungism holds that the leader is to be the determinator of policy, to whom loyalty is of cardinal necessity. Here we go. So this is going to be in opposition to this. This is going to be proof how they're trying to brainwash everybody around the concept of an individual leader. Sodi, no, stop it. Drop your badness. No, you stop being bad. Not under the table. Soda, what did I just say to you? Jesus Christ, Cat. Alright, like I was saying, she's acting up. She doesn't like this. She hates this work. So, here we go. Here's the contradiction now. The party's lines and policies, strategies and tactics are put forward by the leader. ... Or ellipse, I guess. Ellipsis. The leader is the supreme controller of the party, and the party's leadership is precisely his leadership. Remaining unwaveringly loyal to the leader is a natural communist obligation. Where's the lie? Where's the lie? Okay, first of all, right? If the leader wasn't to be the lead of the party, why would the party elect them? And so if the party elects them in massive party elections, then why would it be reactionary to be loyal to a party that represents that will of the people? This is how Khrushchev literally discredited Stalin. I thought that that's what hoaxes are against. And that's what's funny when we get into this shit. So here, right here, the leader, ellipsis is this, plays the decisive role in shaping the destiny of the popular masses. Ellipsis is this. Loyalty to the leader is the highest expression of the party, working class, and people-oriented spirit. Yes. Now, who knows how much is missing out of this unless we actually go and look at this. Oh, look, this is actually two works. This is actually two works mashed together. So this is on carrying forward the Juche idea, and it's also Pyongyang on some problems in the education of the Juche idea. So, but this is funny. So he's not saying that the leader is an individual, because they're talking about the leader. And here we go again as well. I don't know what version of the books they were taking this from, but the quote about the capitalist elements still remaining in town and country will have to be remolded along socialist lines instead of expropriating them. In my version, from 2 different pages, the petty bourgeoisie can be remolded along socialist lines. Although their dual nature causes them to waver between the two paths, the socialist and the capitalist elements still remaining in town and country will have to be restricted and utilized and remolded step by step on socialist lines. Wow. Wow, that is a really devious cherry pick. Like, again, even with the cherry pick, you could see how it wasn't saying what they were trying to lead us out to saying. But that is super fucking insidious context to leave out. Especially since it's not even very long context to be leaving out. They're literally leaving it out for the specific point of making that deception. Right? That's what's disgusting about it. And again here, the revolutionary struggle is conducted under the guidance of the leader in accordance with his ideas and will. The more we are faithful to the leader's ideology and will, the more worthy a life we shall enjoy. Here's the thing I'm going to say in response to this. I'm sorry that DPRK... Oh, I'm sorry. Let me finish this, because now look at this. Who are they quoting here? They're What the fuck is this book they're quoting? Hold on, I just gotta see what this book is. The Korean Economy at a Crossroads. $90 fucking dollars. Development Prospects, Liberalization, and South-North Economic Integration. By Sung Hyuk Kwak. Forward by Lawrence R. Klein. Bloomsbury Publishing. They're quoting here. Okay. Sure, this will be very fucking useful, won't it? Okay, so here's what they're quoting. I just wanted to see what they're quoting here. So, they're using this book to prove how anti-Marxist the position is. I love that. I love that. I love that. I really do love that. I love when somebody takes this fucking book that looks like it's put out by some fucking US think tank, Bloomsbury Publishing. The ROK economy has experienced rapid growth in the last 30 years. Analyzing the important issues which have been raised by this growth is of interest to other developing areas of the world. The contributors to this work are well-placed specialists in Korean studies in Korea and the United States. The ROK economy is located in the midst of the Pacific Basin, the most promising part of the developing world. Recently, the economy has moved into more highly sophisticated markets, as well as the global financial markets. However, an increasing number of concerns have been raised, charging that the progress has been too rapid, too materialistic, too inequitable. These criticisms have been compounded by the problems of political dissent and instability in the region. So that's what they're fucking quoting here to prove now that this anti-Marxist Leninist conception gave rise to an exaggerated cult of the personality of both Kim Il-sung and his son, designated successor Kim Jong-il. So here we go, we're going to quote that work now. The personality cult as practiced by North Korea is unparalleled. For example, birthdays for both Kims are internationally celebrated. Yeah, how dare they? Apparently the authors of this don't like that. Imagine if people in USSR celebrated Lenin and Stalin's birthday or something. How fucking terrible would that be? Huh? The 1992 celebration of Kim Il-sung's 80th birthday required many working days of preparation by thousands of people, young and old, and lasted well into May. The cost was estimated to be around $1 billion, including many millions spent on some 3,000 performing artists from 80 different countries. What the fuck? For his part, Kim Jong-il described in a recent biography as the great thinker and theoretician, outstanding genius of leadership, boundly benevolent teacher of the people, and a great man of the century. True! All those things are true about Kim Jong-il. I will unflinchingly say all of this. The great thinker and theoretician, yes. Outstanding genius of leadership, yes. Boundlessly benevolent teacher of the people, yes. Great man of the century, yes. All those things describe Kim Jong-il. Thank you for your accurate description of Kim Jong-il, quoted in this lovely, lovely work. Sometimes so, anyway, I've explained this, I've talked about this before, but the idea of, like, this being an individual cult of personality when it's talking about fucking Stalin or Lenin, etc., rather than going, oh no, this cult of personality is bad, we should be careful, we should be very careful not to let the masses praise the leaders too much because then the West will think it's a cult of personality. You know what we should be saying instead? Instead, we should be saying, fuck Western Marxism, we uphold our leaders. Should I break out that fucking, that Kim Il-sung quote, or sorry, the Kim Jong-il quote that I did way at the beginning of this? I think maybe I should, right? Remember that quote that I gave you? I'll find that again. Because I think that the quote I read you earlier about Stalin and upholding for communist morality really does make a lot more sense. I'm actually going to show you, hold on, another piece here too. let's see. I've got this video that I want to show you. Let me see if I can find that, because I've got this little video clip where somebody literally goes, what about your individual leaders? Mr. Pak. He was asked about it. Interesting videos, DPRK. I thought I would have had it in here. I do not, so we'll have to go to my page. Okay. Well, then what I'll do is I'm gonna switch my profile to this. Okay, because now I can bring this up on screen, because I'm gonna show you something now. Couple things. If I go to this page of mine, bring up my actual monitor here. Okay, so this is one of my Facebook pages. I've been defending DPRK for a long time. This is one of the Facebook pages that I made a long time ago. Now, Reels they're called now. Right? Yeah, you go to my Reels here. Let's see, can I search my Reel? Well, look at the way this fucking loads Facebook. It'd be so nice if I could search the page. Wow. Wow. It's like not even loading any of the things. Damn it. Search this page. Mr. Pack. Hi, Sodi. Right here. Beautiful. Thank you. So this guy right here. 30-second clip, right? And this guy just asked, Mr. Pack refutes the notion of a personality cult or a great man theory of DPRK. Somebody asked him literally what this Albanian communist is charging them of having. Soda, would you quit it? I don't got time for your bullshit.
Also, there must be a leader who can lead a channel.
Sorry, my goddamn cat. Okay, now listen to what he says here. Someone says, what about the cult of personality of your country? And here's this response.
One leader who can understand what's the collective need, right? And also there must be a leader who can lead, channel the collective efforts into something which collective desired. Otherwise, the social disorder will arise. So according to our conception of society, there must be a leader. And the leader is quite different from the individual.
Right there. That's the most important part. Bunker Cat, thank you so much for the raid. Welcome in, Bunker Cat Raiders. It's funny. East Korea raid, let's go. It's funny that your name's Bunker Cat and that you happen to be raiding on this day when we're pushing back against the hoaxest anti-DPRK article. Because, as some of you may know, Hoaxia is very famous for building a lot of goddamn bunkers. Sometimes we call them bunker socialism. Well, everybody go follow my comrade, Bunker Cat. Speaking of a Bunker Cat, Soda is up to no fucking good here. So I was just pushing there. I was just looking at this part here in this thing that we're reading, where this article claims that DPRK has a cult of personality, and therefore it's not like Marxism-Leninism. It violates Marxism-Leninism. It violated Marxism-Leninism with its cult of personality around Kim Il-sung. And this guy here is essentially asked this same question. Somebody asked him, you know, what about the personality cult that you have in DPRK? I mean, that's the way I read it too, Ninja Can. But that's the way they want you to look at it, right? So,
one leader who can understand what's the collective need, right? And also there must be a leader who can lead, channel the collective efforts into something which collective desired. Otherwise, the social disorder will arise. So according to our conception of society, there must be a leader. And the leader is quite different from the individual. In this respect, I quite strongly object to the term personality cult concerning our great leader.
And so, the most important thing, like I pointed out, that he says there, of course, is that our leader is quite different from the concept of the individual. And the reason for that, of course, is because in a socialist society like DPRK, you don't have individual leadership, you have collective leadership. And the only reason Kim Il-sung or Kim Jong-il or anyone else is able to lead in the position they are is because they have the approval of the people. And like, see, look, and then they'll do this right here. Of course they do this one. Sometimes, indeed, it is implied that the Kims possess divinity. This this fucking Euro wants you to think, of course, that they're implying in what I'm about to read you here, okay? From the KCNA. They're implying that the Kims possess divinity. On the occasion of Kim Jong-il's appointment as General Secretary of the Korean Workers' Party, the official Korean news agency reported miraculous events around Mount Paktu. At around 5:10, when the special communique informed the people of the election of the General Kim Jong-il as General Secretary of the WPK, a colored cloud appeared on Mount Paktu. Its rims were dyed with 7 colors. At that moment, mysterious sounds reminiscent of cheers and applause came from the surface of Lake Chon. Witnessing these wonderful natural phenomenon, its inhabitants said that nature also celebrated Kim Jong-il's election. Well, there you go. What? There you go. That's proof. They're giving Kim Jong-il. Isn't that proof right there of them giving Kim Jong-il divine, right? Isn't that what those silly Asian people do? I mean, it's not fucking saying that. That's the most insidious, like, interpretation you can make, right? It's like they're giving you a poetic fucking description of a day that they find extremely inspirational. Kim Jong-il's getting elected. But they're, like, charging it as being... They're implying that the Kims possess divinity. It says, witnessing these wonderful natural phenomenon, its inhabitants said that nature also celebrated Kim Jong-il's elections. Comrades. Do you really think that this article is trying to say that the people are ascribing it in, like, a divine way that nature is celebrating Kim Jong-il's elections? Or do you think that they're just like, they're really happy about him being elected and it's like a poetic way of describing what they're experiencing? Right? Like, come on. It's like, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not, it's like just an uncharitable, evil fucking reading of these people's words. Witnessing these wonderful natural phenomena, its inhabitants said that nature also celebrated Kim Jong-il's elections. Haha, they think of him as a god. Silly Asian people. They don't know better. They think he's a god, even though, you know, he died. Even though they have a cadre system. Like, come on. Good God. Okay. And then they do... Oh, here we go. Here's a classic anti-DPRK one here. However, the Constitution of Democratic People's Republic was amended in April 1992. According to Keesing's record of world events, in order to remove mentions of Marxism-Leninism and to replace it with references to Kim Il-sung's Juche ideology. There you go. They erased Marxism-Leninism. How could they do that? Damn. They really hit the delete button, huh? Marxism-Leninism. Gone. Erased from the minds. Erased from the peoples. Erased from the books. From the websites. From the movies. No more Marxism-Leninism. It's all replaced by images of Kim Il-sung only. And his name. Every mention of Marxism-Leninism replaced by mentions of Kim Il-sung instead. The more Marx and Lenin your revolution has, the more revolutionary it is. The less Marxism-Leninism portraits and mentions you have, the less revolutionary it is. That's how it works, folks. I don't make the rules. Enver fucking Hoxha does, apparently. Apparently Enver Hoxha does. And Enver Hoxha says, the more portraits and mentions of Marx and Engels, the more revolutionary your revolution is. Clearly that's a revolutionary line. The fuck? What the hell are we talking about here? I'm just trying to find this quote here. Okay. First of all, I'm looking for that quote. There's another one here too I'm looking for right quick. Oh, right here. Okay. Well, that's weird because in 1991, too, Kim Jong-il unfortunately said this, much to the horror of these fucking hoaxes, whoever these are writing the Bill Bland. Sorry, much to the horror of Bill Bland. Unfortunately, we have Kim Jong-il on record as saying, in their day, Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin represented the aspirations and demands of the exploited working masses, and the cause of socialism was inseparably linked with their names. Sounds like this guy's a profound theoretician and philosopher. You know? I'm no follower of any cult of personality or anything, but this guy seems like a pretty genius philosopher and working class thinker. You know? I'm just saying. Don't call me a personality cultist or nothing, but it's just now what I'm noticing that sometimes about him. You know? I don't want to, like, be accused of nothing here. Oh, here we go. Here's the proof. The anti-socialist proof is right here. Here it is. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, guided by the Juche idea, a world outlook centered on the people, a revolutionary ideology for achieving the independence of the masses of people. Socialist Constitution of the DPRK. The demagogic statement that the WPK's policy is one of promoting self-reliance is shown by its actual policy. From 1980s on, of encouraging foreign investment, joint ventures with foreign capital, and establishment of special economic zones on the Chinese model. The Chinese model, you chat. Oh no. How can they be self-reliant, Chad, if they want foreign capital investments? Huh? Huh? Touche. You're against imperialism. Saudi. You're against imperialism, yet you fight to weaken it. Curious. Huh. You hate capitalism, yet you use capital from capitalists to try and develop your people, to try and feed your people who are under economic sanctions. That's not socialist, dog. Pack it up, is what this article's trying to say. Like, come the fuck on. This is gross. I'm sorry you had to do these things to survive, but sorry, you're not socialist. Oh, here. Article 37 of the Constitution in 1992. The state shall encourage institutions, enterprises, and organizations in our country to joint ventures, cooperation of enterprises with foreign corporations and individuals. Oh no. Can you imagine? I thought Lenin wrote something about rope once, but you know, what do I know? Let's see, is there anything else worth fucking... Oh god. Okay, here's one. Degeneration into philosophical idealism. The pretext given by Kim Il-sungism for revising Marxism is that it is now obsolete. Kim Il-sungism doesn't revise Marxism-Leninism. Marxism, represented the era when the working class had emerged in the historical arena and was waged a struggle against capital, But the times have changed, and history has developed. So Marxism has acquired inevitable historical limitations. That's true. Yes, it has. And those historical limitations are revealed in socialist construction. You know why? Because Marx and Lenin never lived through a socialist country to be able to make new theory regarding how to develop a socialist country in a socialist country. Because they were concerned with analyzing and understanding capitalism and imperialism and how to establish a socialist state. That's why Juche is considered a new original philosophy. Because it considers Marxism-Leninism to be correct, right? But Marxism regards the laws of science, including the laws of economics, as proceeding objectively independently of the will of man. Okay, so here we go. This is going to be some philosophical stuff that people always get fucked up. Here we go. Stalin. Here we go. Boy, this is gonna annoy the fuck out of me, this part. I can tell. Dorko, welcome. Marxism regards laws of science, whether they be laws of natural science or laws of political economy, as the reflection of the objective process which take place independently of the will of man. Man may discover these laws, get to know them, study them, utilize them in the interest of society. Oh boy! But he cannot change or abolish them. Still less can he form or create new laws of science. They're already gonna This is great. I love that they chose this. I love that they chose this quote. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Espresso Stalinist, for making this easy on me. Okay. Thanks to Marxist-Leninists, freedom is not freedom from operation of the laws of nature, but the recognition of these laws, the appreciation of necessity. So this is Engels. Freedom of the appreciation of necessity. Freedom does not consist in the dream of independence of natural laws, right? But in the knowledge of these laws. And the possibility this gives of systematically making them work towards definitive ends. Oh, this is so good. They pick such good quotes. They pick such good quotes. What can this appreciation of necessity means? It means that having come to know the objective laws, man will apply them with full consciousness. Oh boy, this is excellent. Okay, so let's see. How does this... how does this contradict it? Here we go. In contrast to this, Kim Il-sungism presents man as a being above the laws of biology. How insidious. How insidious for them to say such a thing. Aha, and let's see. And here's what they use to try and prove this. This is how 6Fs interpret Juche. I love this. Unlike biological beings, humanity is the master and transformer of the master of the world. They shape their own destiny by their own needs by transforming the objective world to meet their needs. Where's the lie there, chat? Where's the lie? Can you point it out to me? Anybody? What is wrong with this? Kim Il-sungism, Kim Jong-ilism is Juche in practice in Korea. But I need you to focus on the question. Where is the what's wrong with this statement? First of all, I want to address one thing here in the statement, which I see they're trying to say that man is a being above the laws of biology. No. We have a biological being. This is my biological being, your body. Your biological being has needs in order to exist. Right? Hunger, so on and so forth, etc., etc. We have that's our biological being. However, is this biological being the thing that makes humanity in the way that we interact with ourselves and interact with nature? Is that what makes us unique? This body, this biological aspect of us, right? Is this biological aspect of us the cause of us living in a society? Is it the cause of us creating the social wealth? Is it the cause of our various social forms of organization? No, it's none of those things, right? Our biological being has needs of eating, etc., etc., etc. But the thing that makes humanity unique in our mode of existence and the way that we develop is the fact that it's not our biological being, it's our social being. And that exists only socially. Because again, like this by the way is talking about the masses as a whole, not talking about individuals. But let's take an individual for the sake of argument, for the sake of this thought experiment. You take an individual, human being, and you put him in monkey society. You put him in wolf society. Well, and you take a wolf or a cat and you put it in human society, the wolf or the cat grow up acting like wolves, cats, monkeys, whatever. They still will try to make contributions to monkey cat society. Cats will even think of you as a giant cat. What is what most researchers believe with cats. Human beings, on the other hand, if you put a human, the biological being of a human, and they grow up in monkey society or wolf society or wherever, they will grow up not being able to speak like a person. And more than that, they won't be trying to contribute to human society. They will be trying to contribute to monkey society or wolf society, right? And they might even bark like a wolf. They might sound like a wolf. They'll act like a wolf, right? Sodi has been trying to make contributions to the stream for quite some time. So is Mewmies. Exactly. But in their contributions, it's to cat society is their efforts. Whereas, humans, and that's kind of like the difference, right? And now the reason why that's important is because that's the thing that gives us the ability to transform the world as a collective, not as individuals, not by our individual whims, but as collectives. And that's why socialism only transforms consciously, or that's why I guess the world only really starts to transform really consciously under socialism. Because that's when the masses, for the first time, have control of society. You as well, Smeshy. So understand that it's not talking about humanity being above the laws of biology. It's talking about humanity not being of the law, like us existing as humanity has nothing to do with the laws of biology in a sense. It does, in that our biological being is what has allowed us to exist as humanity. But the development of humanity is down to a social, historical development, not a biological development. And I mean, this is also proven in things like, well, the social constructs of gender, for example, and race. It's not biological differences, those are social differences. But they still play a real material role on society, right? But this idea that all natural laws have to coincide with social laws, and that there can be no social laws unique to natural laws, that this article is trying to argue is actually against science, is actually against having a scientific understanding of the world. And instead, you're throwing out Marxism, Leninism for vulgar materialism and pretending to be anti-revisionist here. Yeah, or how our biological being extends through all sorts of tools and artifacts. Exactly. And a social wealth as well, Samio, that can exist as in books, right? That is then handed down.
You want attention?
Yeah, exactly, Daydream. Exactly. To be clear, the true potential of cats and dogs are complicated since they are domesticated. A wolf, though, is not fully wolf when living with humans. I mean, absolutely, I agree, but that's like a fine point besides from the overall philosophical point, if you know what I mean. You're talking like a specific scientific, generalized point. We're talking about a philosophical point in understanding humanity's unique development characteristics.
Cool. Big wet sneeze.
Not in a moral way, but in a way of understanding humanity as they actually exist and how they actually interact with the world. And here again, they say, Kim Il-sungism presents man as free from the operation of the laws of nature. Man is a social being with independence, whereas all other material lives maintain their existence through subordination and adoption to the objective world. On the strength of this quality, man throws off the fetters of nature. And then it says, but this is to degenerate into philosophical idealism. And now they're gonna assert that the primacy of spirit to nature. Wrong. This is not asserting that. This is not asserting the primacy of spirit to nature at all. All they're saying is that in the dialectical universe that we live in, right, humanity, they see fetters in nature, and then our mode of existence that is unique to all other creatures is that we see that fetter in nature and we go, what can we do in order to minimize that fetter on our continued existence? That is, and furthermore, because animals will do that part, but furthermore, we will raise that demand to higher and higher levels. When we, for example, when we go on to like early forms of farming, we then want to upgrade that to even easier forms of farming for us, and then eventually mechanize that, and then you know what I mean, and then we want to automate that mechanization. We keep carrying that development higher to a higher and higher stage of wanting to overcome things which restrict us, which cause us to spend a lot of time trying to overcome this thing in nature, whether it's something that's flooding, whether it's spending a lot of time doing this work or that work. That is a feature that is unique to humanity. That's not philosophical idealism. That's humans. That's how humans really exist. And that's what's so funny when people try to critique Juche. Because in trying to prove that it's philosophical idealism, they actually end up going against reality itself. And so now they're trying to argue that this isn't true. But they're not, right? Instead of trying to argue that this is true or not true, they're just arguing how closely this aligns with Marxism, Leninism. Well, now you've lost the plot for what Marxism-Leninism exists to do, which is to understand our world and give us the means to change it. What they should be arguing about is this a true statement or not? Does this reflect reality? Is man a social being with independence? Independence meaning that drive for always overcoming social fetters and natural fetters. Whereas all other material lives maintain their existence through subordination and adaptation to the objective world. On the strength of this quality, man throws off the fetters of nature. That doesn't mean we overcome the operation of the laws of nature. How could man throw off the fetters of nature? How could humanity overcome or lessen the laws of nature? Get this. If we could not understand the laws of nature and use them for our benefit. If you didn't understand that we lived in a dialectical world, how could you believe that humanity could then take those laws that it knows and change the world into one that is better for humanity in the future? If you didn't have a dialectical understanding of the world. Okay, so now we've arrived at two conclusions. Or rather, one conclusion from these two facts, I should say. That Juche, the idea of humanity being the master of the world, their world, and the transformer of their world, can only exist with an understanding of dialectical materialism. Because again, man being able to understand the laws of nature, to be able to cognize those objective laws of nature that coincide with the laws of society and act on society, and society exists in nature. And then, on the other hand, the fact that humanity can change nature to be beneficial to itself would not be able to exist with the understanding that all things are interconnected and always in motion. Nor is dialectical materialism a rejection of abstract social forms which integrate into those biological developments. These types of arguments resolve in a hard determinism, which, like, not even the most teleological Christian evangelists believed. Yeah, exactly. You can see this in a non-human world. Evolution would be possible if being did not have some dialectical self-determined capacity. Yeah, exactly. And that's why that's why saying that this is proof of it rejecting Marxism-Leninism is nonsense. Because these concepts can only exist with an understanding of Marxism-Leninism. And I want to go back up here, and I want to reread you this part that we read right here. Right here. Where was it? I wanted to see that Lenin part again. Must have been down. Oh yeah, Socialist Constitution. Right. I just wanted to see that because this was right here. Yeah. This is why I get so excited. Because Juche is literally describing this right here. Let's listen to this Stalin quote again. Marxism regards laws of science, whether they be laws of natural science or political economy, as a reflection of the objective processes which take place independent of the will of man. Juche did not deny that at all. Not only that, right? Juche, and here's the thing, the unique thing that Juche discovered was the social laws that are unique to the objective material laws. However, it recognizes that those objective material laws still act on society. Which is why when a certain material condition is met, that material law acts on society, and thus it takes it looks like a spontaneous change is happening. But in reality, and this is accordance with Marxism, Leninism, and historical materialism as well, mind you. But in reality, Changes haven't happened spontaneously. Feudalism didn't go from being feudalism to capitalism spontaneously. Capitalism doesn't go from being capitalism to socialism spontaneously. Again, they can take an appearance of spontaneity, but that is due to the low level of the masses' consciousness of their own independence, such as in the feudal society. There wasn't a large numbers of people that were conscious of their class interests, and even less so conscious, of course, of the larger class structure as a whole, the existence of class is an oppressive instrument. But at the same time, the conscious efforts of people fighting against the oppression and the exploitation they were feeling is the thing that made feudalism transform into capitalism, not a spontaneous process. People's independent demands were raised to a level of being anti-feudal. It wasn't that they were tricked by bourgeois interests, it's that those bourgeois interests coincided with that idea of the masses at the time, with that level of consciousness of the masses. Juche doesn't deny any of that, as we've just seen. So, man may discover these laws, get to know them, study them, utilize them in the interest of society, but he cannot change or abolish them. Juche never says that. Still less can he form or create new laws of science. Freedom, and this is the best one because Juche really is expressing like this emerging for the first time in world history, as DPRK is the most advanced socialist state in history that we have so far seen. I say that unironically, even though, of course, it lags behind in the technological revolution compared to somewhere like China. Politically, ideologically, and culturally, it is far ahead in any other revolution. Revolution being a transitionary period, some places move faster, some places go slower by various objective things that happened in the revolution, such as the genocidal campaign that Korea suffered under. So this quote by Engels, though: freedom is the appreciation of necessity. Freedom does not consist in the dream of independence of natural laws, but in the knowledge of these laws, and the possibility this gives of systematically making them work towards definite ends. That's what this is talking about, right here. Humanity is a social being with independence. Whereas all other material lives maintain their existence through subordination and adaptation to the objective world. So what is this saying? This is saying that humanity is a social being with independence. And that characteristic, our social being, our independence, is the thing that makes us want to learn the laws of nature. And then be able to take those laws of nature that we learn and put them into practice. That is exactly what it's... Is this making sense to anybody? Right? The social being with independence, us being social beings with independence, is the driving force that makes us want to learn those laws of material world and of social development, and then use those laws to develop society into one that serves humanity better. That's not a prescription. That's what humanities do. Yeah, and here again, see, they're taking a very out of context thing. Animals are part of nature, and their destiny is determined by natural laws of change and development. Whereas humanity is not a being which obeys the natural laws of change and development. Now again, the way they're conflating this is by, again, we have a biological being. Our biological being obeys the natural laws of change and development. And then that reflects on our social development. But it does so through our social consciousness. not as a perfect reflection, which was a caveat that even Marx and Engels made in developing historical materialism. So again, and no, it is not we are not beings which just obey natural laws. We want to learn the laws and make them work in our interests. We want to learn the laws so that we can develop society and our social relations in a way that is more suited to those things. Unlike other living matter, which is subordinate to the objective world, humanity dominates and transforms the world in accordance with their will and desire. Yep, true. That's true. Right? I mean, this is the thing, Frank. What's amazing is like Juche expresses what Engels interprets will happen. That humans will become conscious and then transform their world consciously. Juche is the first ideology, the first philosophy that emerges by humans in that very condition. But because of the Orientalism of people like these hoaxes writing this article, they go, oh no, Korea's not a socialist society. It's actually just a deformed worker state lying about socialism. So therefore, it can't possibly have come out with a new universal philosophy, which is most useful under socialism. No, not that at all. It's all just lying to try and justify its revisionism. And that's what this whole article is trying to assert. And that's why, unlike if I was to go and read Foundations of Leninism, the way that they're quoting Kim Il-sung and even Marx and Engels and other people, the way that they're quoting them is fucking insidious. This is why when you read Foundations of Leninism, or when you read State and Revolution, this is why Lenin and Stalin quote Stalin quotes Lenin, and Lenin quotes Marx and Engels at length. This is why they quote them in extreme length in their works. So that you can't fucking misinterpret it. So that it can't be cherry picked. So that it can't be just like made to try and frame it a certain way. And that's why this work is using, look at this. It's using sentences sometimes to make a point. That's a sentence. That's not even a whole sentence. That's a broken sentence. Harlem Tragedy, welcome in. Yeah, and here's the thing though, I will always caution you with when you say I don't like Kim Jong-il's framing here. Two things. You have more influence of Kantianism and bourgeois philosophies in your head than Kim Il-sung did when he wrote it. Than Kim Jong-il did when he wrote this. While he studied those, he wasn't inundated with those philosophies like we are, for one. And second of all, Korean is a very different language in the way things are described. And thus, when it gets translated, it oftentimes it gets translated in very restrictive ways. You have to make creative choices when you translate. It's why the best translations from Japanese or Korean are done by localizers. Because direct translations are entirely useless. So that's the two responses I would have to you saying I don't even completely agree with Kim Jong-il's framing here. My question would be, A, how much of it is Kim Jong-il's framing, and how much of it is from him just not, like, we have reactionary ideologies in mind whenever we think of things because we're fighting against those reactionary ideologies. They're already living in a world now where when he wrote this, where Marxism-Leninism is the legalized dominant force of society, ideologically, right? And then here we go. This idealist concept is embodied in the slogan of the Workers' Party of Korea. Here we go. Look, this is to discredit them, not even a whole sentence. When the party is determined, we can do anything. There we go. Anti-Marxist. And then see, they'll try, and then they say, furthermore, Marxism holds that the mode of production determines the consciousness of man. Okay. However, Kim Il-sungism rejects this as a fundamental fact. Okay, is this rejecting it? I feel like they actually cut out a big part of this work here. They said the theory, like, wait a sec. Why is there this portion cut out and then it's just a comma? I hate when they do that. The theory of socialism in the preceding age, based on materialist outlook of history, was not free from historical limitations. The theory did not regard social and historical movement as a movement of the motive force. In other words, the movement of the masses. That's what's missing. That's what's missing here, is a movement of the masses. But as a natural historical process which changes and develops due to material and economic factors. That's not saying that Marx and Engels understood it that way, but he's saying that if you mechanically use the theory to interpret social history, that is the way it is. Which even Marx and Engels, if you read the rest of this, which even Marx and Engels themselves ran into. Which is why when developing historical materialism, they had certain caveats. They had certain rules that they made to make up for the limitations of mechanical interpretations of historical materialism. That's just a fact. That's what they did. Jesus, fuck this word. So, but is a natural process which changes and develops due to material and economic factors. Seeing material and economic, see? Okay, I just need to read the assertion they're making again to get this in my head again. So they're saying Marxism-Leninism holds that the mode of production determines the consciousness of man. Kim Il-sung is rejecting this because it says, seeing material and economic factors as fundamental in revolutionary struggle, the preceding theory of socialism failed to raise the task of strengthening the motive force of revolution and enhancing its role as the basic way of carrying out revolution. That's not saying what it says it says. That's not saying what they're saying it says. Look, okay, first of all, this is not rejecting this does not reject that the mode of production determines consciousness. This is not arguing against that. What this is saying, read this. Actually read this, right? Forget about trying to fucking compare it like they're doing. Actually read this. It says, seeing material and economic factors as fundamental in the revolutionary struggle. The preceding theory of socialism failed to raise the task of strengthening the motive force of the revolution. Because the preceding theory of socialism, remember, was just very, very generalized predictions and suppositions. So the theory of socialism was maybe commodity production would be becoming overcome, especially in various forms of social life, etc., right? Like in Critique of the Gotha program. Because, again, a very generalized theory of socialism. And instead we had things like, well, let's give you one example. What's one example of Marx's preceding theory of socialism? It was that socialism would emerge where capitalism was most highly developed. Is that true or false? Did revolution emerge where capitalism is most highly developed? And this is nothing against Marx or saying that it's wrong. We're just recognizing historical limitations here. Now let's look at Lenin. Lenin said, using the same material and economic factors as fundamental in trying to understand revolutionary struggle, which is a great benefit compared to what was there before, but it's just saying it has historical limitations. Right, he said he was wrong about this. Right, but that's not the question I asked, right? The reason, because what's important is the reason he realized he was wrong about that was because he saw in practice, due to the experience of the Paris Commune and the failed German Revolution, he saw in practice what went wrong. He saw in practice that historical limitation. The reason, however, why he came to that conclusion to begin with was because he was applying historical materialism in a more mechanical fashion. Until he had the practical experience and the data of a real revolution to go, okay, this was a limitation of the historical materialist analysis of history. Therefore, we need to figure out the rule behind this. Right? That's why I'm saying what's most important is the question that I asked. Seeing material and economic factors as fundamental in the revolutionary struggle is what led Marx to first conclude that where capitalism is most developed, that's where revolution would break out. The next person who tries to address this question is Lenin, concretely. Again, Marx realized he was wrong. He came up with some other suggestions. He said about the proletariat not being able to take hold of state power. But then the next person who addresses the same topic, coming from material and economic factors as fundamental to revolutionary struggle, is Lenin. And Lenin says that where the chain of imperialism is weakest is where revolution will break out, because that seemed to be the experience of Russia. Right? And that economic law does appear to coincide with Russia. However, revolutions that happened after that, especially China and DPRK, proved that, in fact, it wasn't where the chain of imperialism was weakest. That even where imperialism is incredibly focused on multiple segments, even overlapping, a revolution can still win. So then what is the factor that determines revolution? It's the consciousness of independence of the people. That is the factor. Does that deny that capitalism had shaped the consciousness of people? Does that deny that capitalism is what has allowed that consciousness to exist in the first place? Of course not. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Juche does not contradict Marxism. It doesn't contrast Marxism. It's not even a revision of Marxism. That's why it's an original philosophy. Marx here says, the chapter on primitive accumulation does not pretend to do more than trace the path by which Western Europe, the capitalist order of economy, emerged from the womb of the feudal order of economy. That is all. But that is too little for my critic. He feels he absolutely must metamorphosize my historical sketch out of a genesis of capitalism in Western Europe into a historico-philosophic theory of the general path of every people is fated to tread, whatever the historical circumstances in which it finds itself, in order that it may ultimately arrive at the form of economy which ensures, together with the greatest expansion of the productive powers of social labor, the most complete development of man. I beg his pardon. He is both honoring and shaming me too much. Yes, exactly. And this is why I say, like, Marx, historical materialism, you can think of as this broad view of history. Long view of history, right? Which and Juche, by the way, still is this long view of history. But you think of Marx as this long view of history, and you're viewing history in huge bounds. From one revolutionizing of class relations to another revolutionizing of class relations. That's historical materialism. Juche gives you a lens that allows you to zoom in to the Marxist-Leninist theory and see things even closer. Which is why I say Juche still allows you to see that huge view that Marxism-Leninism lays out, but it does so, it's able to do so because of Marxism-Leninism, but then it gives you a lens that you can zoom in and say, why did humanity go from primitive society to, or proto-communist society to slave society? Well, that's because of humanity struggling against the fetters of nature, which led to a certain economic inequality, which was then justified by certain people as a thine, a mine, thus thine type of situation, which led to reactionary ideologies such as, greed and individualism. Right? Or I guess individualism and then greed, which comes out of individualism. Does that make sense to anybody else? Or am I just like, scarcity teaches those negative behaviors? Yeah. Well, and the person who had more than another. I don't know what the material conditions that led to that particular event emerging, but you can imagine a condition like that. Either way, the fact is that the whole struggle of the whole class struggle emerges out of humanity's struggle to realize its own independence, both in the natural realm, trying to overcome those natural fetters which restrict us and cause us to spend lots of time focusing on them, and then as well those social fetters which restrict us in various ways, such as capitalist property laws. Yeah, another way of seeing it is depth versus breadth, which is why I say we should study both Marxism, Leninism, and Juche, because then you have both. And then of course we got this. Oh yeah, this is my favorite part right here. And then we'll end it on this, I think. According to Marxism-Leninism, so here's apparently where Juche is now rejecting class categorization, it says. According to Marxism-Leninism, social class is extremely important objective social category. Classes are large groups, blah, blah, blah. Well, we know what this says. But now listen to what they're gonna try and say about this here. But here again, Kim Il-sungism degenerates into philosophical idealism in place of the objective division of society into classes. It divides society into the masses of the people and the others, purely on the basis of the ideas they hold. Yep. And that's a more accurate way to understand social forces. It is. And that's why Kim Jong-il says the basic criterion for deciding whether one is a member of the masses, of the people, or not, is not one's social and class origin, but one's ideas. Anybody who loves the country, the people, and the nation is qualified to be a member of the masses of people. And yeah, the division of society into classes is an objective. Exactly. Exactly. That is the funny thing. Because here, the author has slipped into... the author themselves has now slipped into metaphysics. Right? And that's what's funny. In them trying to critique Kim Il-sungism as being idealist, they themselves have now become idealist. Don't laugh, all our Marxist-Leninists, hoaxists, are now idealists. Because what they're saying here is that classes are immutable as they exist. They're saying objective division of society into classes. I'm sorry, but society is not objectively divided into classes. And in fact, that's why Kim Jong-il correctly states that when socialism is established, everybody is transformed into working members of the working masses. That means that the former lumpen proletariat, the former petty bourgeoisie, the former big bourgeoisie, all of these classes become members of the masses. In fact, in capitalism, many of those are members of the masses as well. Oh shit! Weird, right? But it's true. Unless you're part of the big bourgeoisie, you can actually be a member of the masses. The problem here is because we live in a reactionary society, the bourgeoisie are able to convince the people to be against the masses en masse, against themselves in great numbers, in massive numbers. And that is the contradiction of capitalism that we're trying to overcome, right? That's literally the contradiction that we're trying to overcome right now. So we can even use the members of the masses in a capitalist society. We mainly focus on trying to educate other members of the masses. If we were to focus purely on trying to reach members of the working class in the classic definition of Marx, how successful do you think our revolution in North America is going to be? When the working class is a fucking category that is even hard to fucking define here with the way that our fucking, you know? No. What made the working class revolutionary isn't that they came from a working class background. What makes them revolutionary is that they have the most revolutionary consciousness. They have the most advanced revolutionary consciousness that represents not only their own interests, but the interests of the broad masses. I'm quoting Lenin and Stalin here. That's literally what Lenin and Stalin say, dog. Like, what? Yeah, and here we go, this part. In line with this philosophical idealism, Kim Il-sungism rejects the Leninist principle that the party should lay primary stress on changing the objective conditions of society. In the past, the founders of Marxism evolved socialist theory by putting the main stress on material and economic conditions. Okay? Yes, that's true. Kim Il-sungism gives priority to the ideological remolding of man. Good! In socialist society, the transformation of humanity, their ideological remolding, becomes a more important and primary task than of creating the material and economic conditions of socialism. True! Again, in their desire to try and prove this to be revisionist to fucking, like, Marxism, Leninism, or whatever, they're literally rejecting reality. That's a true statement. That quote by Kim Jong-il. In socialist society, the transformation of humanity, his ideological remolding, becomes more important and primary task than the creating of material and economic conditions of socialism. This is a true statement. Do you know why? Can anybody answer why this might be the case? Ideas being part of a causal vector is not idealism. It is thinking that ideas exist independently of material causes, and a different type of substance that is idealism. Exactly, Samuel. Marx and Engels themselves recognize the positive action that consciousness can play on society, especially when the masses grasp hold of consciousness. Literally, I'm quoting from Engels there. So this part is the most important. This part here, and I'm just wondering who can answer why this is the case. In socialist society, the transformation of man, their ideological remolding, becomes more important and primary task than the creating of material and economic conditions of socialism. That's not saying that, and let's be very clear here, while I'm asking anybody to, if you know why this is the case, This is not saying that creating the material and economic conditions of socialism are unimportant or not important. But they're saying that the transformation of humanity, the ideological remolding of people, is more important. And the reason it's more important is because even if you build up all of the economic and material conditions of socialism, do people become socialists automatically? Let's say, for a thought experiment, right? Let's say that today, the US magically somehow, Trump slips and falls, and he falls on the socialist button. And the US becomes somehow materially socialist. Would all of the people in America also suddenly become socialist overnight? Or would they require a period of ideological struggle, ideological remolding? Come on, right? Again, and this is why I'm saying, in trying to reject Kim Il-sungism and prove how Kim Il-sungism is going against Marxism-Leninism, they're actually showing their ass and showing that they're rejecting reality itself in trying to reject Juche. In their goal to reject fucking Juche, they have rejected reality. Whereby, of course, we know that an active struggle against all the ideological backwardness of the people is a necessary feature of society. Yeah, I mean, actually, I got a funny Kim Jong-il quote for what you just said right there, Frank, about rejecting philosophy. Yes. And this is why Kim Jong-il, to go back up to that quote where they said Kim Jong-il is a brilliant philosopher, I unironically think that. I share that opinion of Kim Jong-il. And this quote right here, to me, like, really speaks to how much he understands not just Marxism-Leninism, but philosophy in general. This quote right here. Tell me if this quote doesn't make you want to sit down because your knees will buckle. This is like one of the most banger quotes of all time, and low-key shows you how great of a philosopher he really was. Why should we be misunderstood by others that we are advocating nationalism when we created the wonderful Juche idea of universal importance that has inherited and developed the progressive ideologies of humankind? It is wrong to think that only natural sciences have continuity in their development. Social sciences and philosophical thoughts also develop continuously. We should always consider all things and phenomena from the viewpoint of development. All things have two aspects: inheritance and innovation. To observe only one aspect is a metaphysical viewpoint. And dare I say that this right here, this Kim Jong-il quote, perfectly highlights the problem that this Bill Bland is having. They're failing to understand, both within Marxism and Leninism itself, but also in Juche, they're failing to understand that there is continuity and there is development and inheritance. The reason why people in Korea can understand Juche and also understand Marxism-Leninism is because Marxism-Leninism is contained within Juche. Furthermore, if you were to be a social scientist in DPRK, you would have to actually become an expert in Marxism-Leninism itself as well. Okay? So the idea that they have rejected Marxism-Leninism is nonsense. Yeah, if you believe only in inheritance, you're a fatalist. If you believe only in innovation, you're an anarchist. Exactly. And exactly what Juche does is I told you, gave us that universal philosophy for better understanding socialism and zooming in on our own revolutionary struggles. And the other thing that it did was gave its peoples the condensed important parts of Marxism Leninism that is relevant to their given conditions. Those are the two missions that Juche fulfilled with, I would say, until I see some dramatic counter-revolutionary shift in DPRK, has fulfilled with tremendous success. Right? This and all of this faffing of all of this fluff about them rejecting Marxism Leninism is nonsense. And so their conclusion here okay, I guess well let's read the big bold scary words for the conclusion. In fact, an analysis of the outlook of the Workers' Party of Korea makes it clear that Kim Il-sungism, or Juche, is itself a brand of revisionism elaborated to serve the interests of the capitalist class of a colonial-type country like Korea. A brand of revisionism which aims to hold the revolutionary process at the stage of democratic revolution and prevent it from going forward to the stage of socialist revolution. So once again, at this concluding statement, I end by asking you, where is the capitalist class in DPRK? Yeah, that's what I want to know. Where is the capitalist class in the DPRK? So how is it preserving the capitalist class if they're all gone? You know? Something's not adding up there. If the capitalist class is gone, look, even G-String knows. There isn't a traditional capitalist class like in capitalist countries. The state controls most resources and industries. The system is based on socialism with a strong central government where the ruling party and leader hold power rather than capital owners. So no typical capitalist class there. Wow. Jesus. Imagine being to the right of Trotbrod. I guess that one landlord that got elected. Yeah, that doesn't exist anymore as a landlord, or whatever. Like, this is what I mean. Like, it's just, if the capitalist class is non-existent there anymore, wouldn't the conclusion then be that, this philosophy was right, actually? So there you go. That's our first reading. That's part 1. Good God, next week we'll do part 2. I did psychic damage to myself. I ego damaged myself reading that. There is more parts to this, yes. Okay, I just want to point out, yeah, before we finish up anything today, I want to point out too. And then I'll end us on something nice and with English that we can all enjoy. Maybe some hardcore. No, there's not going to be no more parts. I just want to show you this though. The DPRK on race is one that they shared. Remember I read you a little while ago? First they share one here where they talk about fucking racism towards Obama, which is completely out of context and completely ignores Korean cultural characteristics and things like that. But this article is one that I literally read to you the other day on here, actually a couple weeks ago. The idea of the multinational, multiracial society means the destruction of the Korean nation. And what they're saying is here, those responsible for this commotion are spreading confounding rumors that South Korea is a multiracial area, and actually this is mistranslated, it should say multinational area, mixed with the blood of Americans and several other races. How we must overcome closed ethnic nationalism, and we must embrace the inclusiveness and openness of multi-ethnic nation like the United States. So this isn't them being like white supremacist or something like that. This is them being against the genocidal idea of a melting pot. Which, again, as I pointed out in the video I made about this, which you can find on my channel, the idea of a melting pot is a genocidal idea that settler colonialists, and colonialists in general, wield against their colonial subjects in order to erase them. They say, you're in just a melting pot now. There's no need for special protections for your language. There's no need for special protections of your culture. There's no need for these special laws that protect you, because you're in a melting pot now. And that's what's so insidious about it. And what is the melting pot of South Korea? What is the pot they want them to melt into? Of course, American culture. Right? With giving a little flavor of Korea in there to make it a little bit palatable to the exploiters of Korea. Not so much the working people of Korea. That's less important.